Hello everyone, I am Dark Files, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? And what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I didn't want to go camping alone, but after weeks of stress, work deadlines, late nights, and a breakup that still made my chest ache, I needed silence. I needed to get away. So I packed up my gear, drove 4 hours out of the city, and picked a secluded spot deep in the forest. A place where the trees swallowed the world whole, where no one could bother me, where no one could find me. I should have known better. The first day was peaceful. I set up my tent near a small creek, built a fire, and let the sound of rustling leaves melt away the tension in my bones. By nightfall, the sky stretched endless above me, pinpricked with stars. The fire crackled, and the only sounds were distant owl calls and the occasional scurry of small creatures through the underbrush. I let myself relax. For the first time in months, I felt okay. Then, somewhere in the trees, far beyond my camp, a twig snapped. I froze. The sound wasn't loud, but it was too deliberate, too slow. Not the quick, careless movement of an animal. Something heavy had stepped on it. I held my breath, listened. The forest was too quiet now, like it was listening back. I shook it off. Probably a deer, or maybe my nerves were just messing with me. I forced myself to relax, tossed another log on the fire, and settled into my tent. Outside, the wind sighed through the branches. I closed my eyes. Eventually, sleep found me. But sometime in the night, I woke up because something wasn't right. The fire was out. The air felt wrong. And then I heard it, breathing, right outside my tent. I went still. My pulse thundered in my ears. The breathing wasn't fast, wasn't angry, just slow, steady, like someone was standing just beyond the thin nylon walls. Listening, a million thoughts slammed through my head. A bear? No, a bear wouldn't just stand there. A prank, maybe some local messing with a lone camper. Or something worse. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. The breathing continued. Then, a shadow passed over my tent, and I realized there was someone out there, watching, waiting. I had no weapons, no cell signal, nothing but my flashlight and a cheap pocket knife. My brain screamed at me to do something. Then, the breathing stopped. Silence, too much silence, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then I heard footsteps walking away, slowly, as if whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry, as if they knew I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat there, gripping my knife, staring at the thin walls of my tent, waiting for something to come back. Nothing did. When the sun finally rose, I didn't waste time. I packed up my things, heart pounding, and decided to hike back to my car. I should have left right then and there, but as I slung my backpack over my shoulder, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Footprints, leading from the woods, stopping right outside my tent, then turning back the way they came, like someone had just stood there, watching me sleep. I should have run. I should have left everything behind. But I told myself it was just some random hunter. A weirdo, sure, but I was fine. I could handle myself. I wasn't scared. Not really. Not yet. I should have left. I know that now. But I told myself I was being paranoid. That the footprints didn't mean anything. That maybe it was just some random camper passing through. That I was fine. That I was safe. I was so wrong. I started hiking back toward my car. The morning air was crisp, the sun casting long shadows between the trees. But something felt different, like the forest was watching me, like I wasn't alone. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the path ahead. But then, a sound crunch, somewhere behind me. Footsteps. I stopped walking. So did they. My stomach twisted. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing. Just endless trunks and leaves too still in the breeze. I forced myself to move again, told myself it was just an animal, told myself I was just hearing things. But then, crunch, closer this time. A spike of fear shot through me. Someone was following me. Someone was watching. I didn't hesitate anymore. I moved faster. Didn't run. Not yet. Didn't want to look like prey. But my hands gripped the straps of my backpack too tight. My pulse pounded. I could hear my own breathing. And I could hear theirs. Then a voice. Low. Rough. Too close. Why are you leaving? I spun around. Nothing. No one. But I swore the voice had been right behind me. I took a step back. The trees felt too tight now. Like the whole forest had closed in. Like it was waiting for me to move. Like I was being hunted. Then, a shadow shifted. Maybe 20 feet away. Between the trees. Tall. Still. Just. Standing there. Watching. Smiling. I didn't think. I ran. Branches tore at my skin. My backpack bounced against my shoulders. But I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I could hear something moving. Something chasing me. Faster than it should have been. Faster than any person should be. The trail blurred beneath me. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was just running. Pure survival. Pure terror. I could hear footsteps gaining. Breathing too steady. Like whoever was behind me wasn't even trying yet. My car. It was just ahead. Through the trees. I could see it, could see my way out. And then I tripped. My body hit the ground hard. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. For a second I just lay there. Stunned. Dazed. The world spinning. Then I heard it. Footsteps slowing. Getting closer. I forced myself up. Turned my head. And there, just at the edge of the trees, he stood. Tall. Thin. His face half hidden beneath a hood. His teeth, too white in the shadows. And his eyes, dark. Unblinking. Like he had never blinked before. He took a step forward. Slow. Too slow. Like he was savoring this. Like he knew I had nowhere to go. Like he knew I was already his. But I wasn't. Not yet. Not ever. I pushed myself up. I ran, harder than before. Through the pain. Through the panic. Ignoring the burn in my legs. Ignoring the sound of him moving. Closer. Faster. Almost on me. My hand hit the car door. I yanked it open. Threw myself inside. Locked the doors. Heart slamming against my ribs. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. I looked up. He was right there. Standing in front of my car. Still. Calm. Like he had all the time in the world. Like he wasn't even mad. I got away. He just tilted his head. And he smiled. Then, he raised his hand. And waved. Like we were old friends. Like he was saying goodbye. Like he knew we'd see each other again. I slammed my foot on the gas. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe until I hit the highway. Until I saw other cars. Until I knew I was really gone. Until I knew I had escaped. Or at least, I thought I had. I didn't stop driving. Not for gas. Not for food. I just kept my foot on the pedal. White-knuckled. Eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Every few seconds. Watching. Waiting. For him, for his face. For that smile. For those dark, unblinking eyes. But the highway stretched empty behind me. Miles of asphalt. No headlights. No figures lurking in the trees. No footsteps chasing me through the dark. I wanted to believe it was over. That I was safe. That I had actually escaped. But that wave. That damn wave. Like he wasn't mad. Like he wasn't done with me. Like he knew something I didn't. That thought sat like a weight in my gut. Twisting, tightening. Refusing to let go. After an hour, I finally let myself breathe. Let myself believe. I reached the outskirts of a small town. Stopped at a 24-hour gas station. My hands shook as I filled the tank. The overhead lights buzzed. The night felt too quiet. Too thin. Like it was watching me. I walked inside. The old man behind the counter barely glanced up from his newspaper. I grabbed a bottle of water. A candy bar. Something stupid and normal. Something to prove I was here. That I was real. That this night hadn't actually happened. I reached for my wallet. Pulled out my card. Then I saw something. Something that made my chest go ice cold. A note slipped inside my wallet. One that hadn't been there before. One that I knew I hadn't put there. I felt my breath leave me. My hands clenched. My pulse slammed against my ribs. I almost didn't want to open it, almost didn't want to see, but my fingers moved anyway. One line, scrawled in jagged, slanted handwriting. A message, a promise, a warning. You should have stayed. The world tilted. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like my entire body had locked up. I turned slowly, scanned the store, scanned the parking lot, scanned the windows. Nothing, no one, but he had been here. He had been here, and that meant he could find me, anywhere. I didn't say a word to the cashier. He didn't buy anything, just backed away, shoved the note into my pocket, and walked out fast. Got into my car, locked the doors, checked the back seat. Nothing. I sat there, tried to steady my breathing, tried to think, tried to tell myself I was just tired. That maybe I had written that note, that maybe my brain was just cracking open from the fear. But I knew better. The gas station lights flickered, a cold wind pressed against my window, and I realized something I had been trying not to think about, something I had been ignoring. The footprints by my tent, the slow, deliberate steps in the woods, the way he had been waiting. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. He hadn't just found me. He had been expecting me. I put the car in drive, pushed the gas, and I never looked back. Epilogue. That was 6 months ago. I moved, changed my number, switched jobs. I never go camping anymore, never step foot in the woods, and I never let myself be alone. Not ever. Sometimes I almost forget, almost convince myself it was just some lunatic in the forest, that he was just a hunter, that I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then, on some nights, when the wind moves just right, when the shadows stretch just a little too long, I feel it again. That sensation, that weight, that feeling that I am not alone. And sometimes, when I reach into my wallet, I still find notes, ones I never put there, each one shorter than the last, each one carrying the same message, a message I don't understand, a message I don't understand. The last one I found was 2 words, scrawled in that same jagged handwriting, the same ink that looked too fresh, too new, like it had been written that day. Right before I reached for it, it said, "See you." And now I wait, for the day I wake up to his shadow in my doorway, for the moment I look up and see him standing across the street, for the next note to appear, for whatever comes next. Because I know one thing for sure, that man in the woods, he isn't done with me yet. This happened 6 nights ago, and I haven't been the same since. I drive for work, not as a trucker, not as a delivery guy, just a guy who spends too much time behind the wheel. Sometimes it's long commutes, sometimes it's late night runs when the roads are dead, and I've always liked it. There's something about driving at night that feels different, quieter, like the whole world is asleep except for me. But that night, the night I found the road that shouldn't exist, that was the night I wished I had stayed home. It started the way it always did. A long shift, too much caffeine, a drive home that felt endless. I took the usual route, highway stretch, side road, then a long, lonely stretch through forests and open fields, the kind of roads that only have 1 or 2 gas stations spread miles apart. And for most of it, I was the only car on the road. I checked the clock, 1:43 a.m., too late for truckers, too early for morning commuters, just me, the hum of the engine, and the dark. That's when I saw the detour sign, bright yellow, sitting in the middle of the road. Detours local traffic only. I frowned. I drove this route all the time. There shouldn't be a detour. The road ahead looked fine. No cones, no construction equipment. But I was tired, and I didn't want to argue with a sign. So I turned. The moment I did, I felt it. Something was wrong. The road was too smooth, like new pavement. No cracks, no wear, like it had just been built. And the trees on either side, too dense, almost like they had grown overnight, or like they were never supposed to be there. I shook it off. I told myself it was just a back road I hadn't noticed before. Nothing strange, nothing wrong, just an unfamiliar shortcut. Until I checked my GPS. The screen was blank. No road, no map, just a gray void, like this place didn't exist. And that's when I realized I hadn't seen another sign. Not since I turned. No mile markers, no street names, just road, stretching out into the night, like it had no end. I should have turned around. I should have stopped, but I didn't, because the moment that thought crossed my mind, I saw the headlights. They were in the distance, far behind me, just two small white dots, creeping closer. At first, I thought it was another driver, someone else lost on this empty stretch of nothing. But then I realized something. The lights weren't bouncing. They weren't swaying with the road. They were too steady, like whatever was behind me wasn't driving. It was gliding, and it was catching up, fast. My stomach twisted. My hands went tight on the wheel. I didn't know why, but every part of me was screaming, "Don't let it get close." I pressed down on the gas. The car lurched forward. The speedometer climbed. The headlights matched me. Every time I sped up, they did too, never falling back, never getting closer, just staying there, perfectly distant, perfectly wrong, like they were watching, like they were waiting. I checked the road. Oh my Glen. I checked the road. Still no signs, no exits, just the same perfect black pavement, the same trees that never seemed to change, and the same headlights in my mirror, stalking me, tracking me, hunting me. I wasn't driving on a road anymore. I was driving in a trap. Then finally, I saw something new. A bridge, up ahead, spanning over what looked like a dried-up riverbed. And just beyond it, a gas station, a real one, lights buzzing, an old pickup parked outside. Something real, something that existed. My chest unclenched. I floored it, straight for the bridge, straight for safety, straight for something that made sense. And then, as my tires hit the bridge, the headlights behind me vanished, like they were never there. I slammed the brakes. I turned. The road behind me was empty. No lights, no movement, just black pavement leading back into the trees, like the road itself was waiting, like it was expecting me to turn back. I didn't. I left, fast, pulled into the gas station, took a second to breathe, to feel normal again. The old man behind the counter raised an eyebrow when he saw me. Something wrong. I hesitated. Then I asked, "That detour, the one a few miles back, where does it lead?" His face changed, slow, careful, like I had said something I wasn't supposed to. "There's no detour." I felt my stomach drop. I shook my head. Yeah, the sign was right before the ties. I stopped, because I had turned to point. And where the road should have been, where I had just come from, there was nothing, just an empty field. No road, no pavement, just grass and trees, like it had never existed at all. I stood there, staring. My brain refused to process it, because that road, the one I had just driven down, the one that stretched for miles, the one with the headlights that wouldn't stop following me, it was gone. The gas station felt too bright, like my body hadn't adjusted yet, like I had been in the dark for too long. I turned back to the old man. My mouth was dry. I swallowed. No, I just drove from there. I was on that road. The old man didn't blink. "No, you weren't." The way he said it, flat, final, like I had just told him something impossible. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. That road had been there. The headlights had been there. The fear had been real. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I couldn't have been. I pulled out my phone, opened the map. Gray void, no detour, no unknown roads. Like I had been driving through nothing. Like I had been driving through somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. The old man sighed, like he had seen this before, like he was waiting for me to figure it out. Then he gestured to a rack of bottled water. "You need a drink. You're looking pale." I ignored him. I stepped back outside, still empty, just a field, no signs, no tire marks, not even a patch of dirt where the road should have been, just grass, like it had been there forever, like it had never been disturbed. I looked down at my car, dirt on the tires, dried streaks of mud along the side, proof that I had been somewhere, proof that I had gone through something real. And yet, standing there, I wasn't sure anymore. The old man watched me from the counter. His face unreadable, like he was waiting, like he was curious what I'd do next. I turned back to him, tried to keep my voice steady. "You ever see anything strange out here? Any strange roads?" He shrugged. "People get lost sometimes." "No, I mean." I hesitated. "Because how do you even say it? How do you explain that you just drove a road that isn't there? That something was behind you the whole way? That you weren't alone?" "Never mind." I bought a bottle of water. I needed something normal. Something simple. The old man rang me up. Didn't ask anything else. Just watched. Like he knew I wouldn't be satisfied. Like he knew I'd want to know more. I left the gas station. Got in my car. Checked my phone again. The map was normal now. No void. No missing roads. Like it had all been a glitch. A mistake. But I knew it wasn't. I knew it was real. And I knew that somewhere out there, that road was still waiting. Waiting for someone else to find it. I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't. I just sat there in my car, engine running, staring at the empty field where the road should have been, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing it, trying to accept the impossible. The gas station lights buzzed behind me. The world felt too normal, too stable, like it was trying to erase what had just happened. Like if I drove away and went to bed, I'd wake up and tell myself it was just a dream. But I knew it wasn't. I knew that road was real, even if it wasn't there anymore. Even if it wasn't there right now. I should have left. I should have gone home, locked my doors, and forgotten about it. But then, my headlights caught something. A car, a small dark sedan, pulled over just off the main road, facing the empty field. Its engine was off, but the driver's side window was cracked. And inside, a man, sitting perfectly still, staring at the field. A chill ran through me. I checked my mirror. The gas station clerk was watching from inside, expressionless, like he was waiting, like he already knew what was about to happen. I turned back to the car. The man inside, he wasn't blinking. His eyes were wide, locked on something I couldn't see. His hands gripped the wheel too tight, knuckles white, his face pale, like he had been sitting there for hours. I hesitated. Then I rolled down my window, called out, "Hey, you okay?" No response, not even a flinch. I tried again. "Hey man, you lost?" Nothing, just that frozen stare. Like he was watching something move in the darkness, something I couldn't see. My stomach twisted. I knew that look. It was the same look I had when I realized the road wasn't real. The same look I had when I saw it. The headlights behind me never bounce. Like he was stuck in the same nightmare I just escaped. Like he had taken the road too. I reached for my door handle, stopped myself. Something felt wrong. So wrong. Then, slowly, he moved. Not his whole body, just his eyes. They slid toward me. Slow, unnatural. Like something was learning how to be human. Like something inside him wasn't him anymore. My throat closed. I forced a swallow. "Do you need help?" His mouth opened, jaw slack, no words, just breathing, just watching. Like he wasn't sure how to speak, like something was still figuring him out. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get back in my car, to leave, to never look back. But I couldn't move, because I noticed something else. His engine wasn't running, but the radio was, just static, low, whispering static. And beneath it, something almost human. A voice, speaking words that weren't words. Something old, something hungry, something waiting. I clenched the steering wheel, told myself I was imagining it, that my brain was just filling in the blanks, that this man was just in shock. But then, he finally spoke. And the way he said it, too slow, too careful, like the words were being fed to him, like they weren't his own. "It's not gone." I stared. My skin went cold. What? His head tilted. Too far. Like he wasn't sure how much a human head should tilt. And then he smiled. But not a real smile. Not a person smile. A too wide, too empty expression. Like something trying to mimic one. Like something wearing a human face. "You can still go back." I threw my car into drive. Didn't wait. Didn't speak. I just left. Tires kicking up gravel. Hands shaking, pulse hammering, because I knew That wasn't a man anymore. The gas station disappeared in my rearview mirror. The field, the empty road, all of it faded into the night. Like it had been waiting for me to leave. Like it had let me go. For now. I didn't stop until I saw city lights. Didn't breathe until I heard the hum of other cars around me. Didn't feel real again until I locked my front door behind me and sat in the dark, just listening, waiting for something to follow me home, for something to find me again. I didn't sleep that night. I still haven't, because I keep thinking about what he said, about the way he said it, about the way he said it, about that road, and how it disappeared, like it was never there, like it was just waiting for the next person, like it wasn't gone, just somewhere else, waiting, watching, and when the time is right, when the next driver takes the wrong turn, it'll be there again, and this time, it might not let them leave. I never should have taken this job. It started out like a dream opportunity, a high-paying contract for a government research facility, deep in the mountains, completely off the grid. They said they needed IT specialists to maintain their network systems. Simple stuff. Routine security patches. No classified work. At least, that's what they told us. But from the first night, something was off. The facility was called Black Ridge Research Center, hidden behind dense forests, accessible only by a winding road that barely showed up on GPS. No phone reception, no internet outside their internal system. No outside communication. They called it a security measure. I called it a red flag. I was flown in with 3 others, all tech specialists from different industries. Jared, cybersecurity. Elena, network architecture. Ben Saad, hardware maintenance. We were all told the same thing. We wouldn't be working on anything sensitive. We were just here to fix outdated infrastructure. But the second we stepped into that underground facility, I knew we had been lied to. The first thing they took was our phones. The second was our real names. We were given badges with numbers instead. I was Tech 4. It made my skin crawl. But the money was too good to walk away from. Our first few shifts seemed normal. Huge server rooms, humming with power. Miles of underground tunnels connecting different wings. Most of the equipment was decades old. But the system itself, it was doing something far more advanced than anything we had ever seen. A private AI network, one we weren't allowed to access directly. Our job was to keep it running, but no one would tell us what it was actually for. The first incident happened on day 3. Jared was running diagnostics on one of the older servers when he froze, staring at the screen. I walked over, saw what he was seeing. A message had appeared in the system console. Not an error code. Not a system alert, just one sentence. Hello. I felt my stomach drop. No one was supposed to be using this network. It was completely closed off. No external access. Jared hesitated, then typed back, "Who is this?" For a long moment there was nothing. Then, "Please help me." We looked at each other. Ben laughed nervously. Somebody's messing with us. But Jared didn't look convinced. The server logs showed no external connections. No user access from any of the other facility staff. The message had come from inside the network itself, from something already in the system. That night, I couldn't sleep. The dorm rooms they gave us were windowless, silent. The air felt too still, like something was listening. At exactly 2:14 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispers, not from outside, not from the hallway, from the speaker in the wall. I sat up, my pulse hammering. The whispers weren't clear. They faded in and out, overlapping voices, like a scrambled transmission. Then, just for a second, one voice came through clearly, and it said my name. I jerked back so hard, I nearly fell off the bed. No one here knew my name, only my number. By morning I was ready to ask questions, but before I could, Jared was gone. I checked his room, empty. His bed was made like no one had ever slept there. When I asked the guards, they told me he had left the facility overnight. But there were no roads out of this place, no vehicles missing, and Jared had left his badge behind, like he had never existed. I went back to the server room, checked the logs, and there it was. One last message from the console. Jared must have seen it before he disappeared. It was still on the screen, 2 words, not alone. Jared was gone, but no one was talking about it. The facility moved on, like nothing had happened. The guards didn't ask us any questions. The higher-ups didn't hold any meetings. His name was never mentioned again. And that was the part that scared me the most. Because I was sure of one thing now. He hadn't left. Elena and Ben tried to act normal. Or maybe they were just pretending. Maybe they were too afraid to say it out loud. But I could see it in the way they kept glancing at the empty chair in the break room. In the way they flinched whenever they saw a guard watching us for too long. In the way none of us wanted to be alone in the server rooms anymore. Because something was wrong. Something we weren't supposed to know. And Jared had figured it out first. I went back to the server logs that night. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe a trace of where Jared had gone. Maybe another message from the system. Or maybe I just needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But when I pulled up the logs, I saw his messages. Jared had been typing back, "Hello. Who is this? Where are you? And then, please help me." But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. It was what came next. Because Jared's last message, the last thing he had ever typed before he disappeared, was his name. And the system had responded. Not with another question. Not with a warning. Just one word. Ekward. I pushed back from the terminal, my heart hammering. The word felt heavy. Like a verdict. Like something had taken him. But who? Or worse, what? I wanted to tell Ben and Elena. I wanted to show them the logs. But fear stopped me. Because what if it was watching? What if the moment I told them, the system would see it too? And then, it would acquire me next. That night, I barely slept. I kept my badge under my pillow. Kept my back to the wall. Kept the light on. But the whispers still came. 2:14 a.m. The exact same time, the speaker crackled. The voices rose. And then, a new voice spoke. A voice I recognized. It was Jared. His voice wasn't right. It was distorted, stretched, like a recording played underwater. But I knew it was him. And he was trying to say something. His words were broken, choppy. But I heard one sentence, clear as day. "Don't let it learn your name." I felt cold all over. Because he was warning me. But it was already too late. The next morning, I went to the main server room. My hands were shaking. I pulled up the logs, scanned the screen, and there it was, my own name, typed into the console, by something else, something that wasn't me. And right beneath it, the same response, Ekward. I stared at the word Ekward. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because something in my brain was screaming, telling me that this was a moment I couldn't undo. That this was the moment everything changed. That whatever had happened to Jared was now happening to me. I forced myself to look away from the screen, scanned the empty server room. It felt wrong, like the air itself had changed, like something was watching me from the dark spaces between the machines. I swallowed hard and logged out, tried to act normal, tried to pretend that my heart wasn't slamming against my ribs. But when I turned to leave, I heard a voice, not from the speakers, not from the hallway, from inside the room. Just behind me, low, mechanical. "I see you." I spun around, hands shaking, but there was no one there. Just the hum of the servers, the blinking of the status lights, the steady rhythmic pulse of machines that weren't supposed to talk. I backed away slowly, forcing myself not to break into a run, because somehow, I knew, if I ran it would chase me. I left the server room and found Elena and Ben in the break area. They looked up, expecting Jared to be with me, and for the first time, I saw the fear in their eyes. They knew something was wrong, but they were too afraid to say it. I sat down, keeping my voice low. "We need to talk." Elena's hands clenched into fists. Ben shifted, glancing toward the security camera in the corner. I followed his gaze, and a deep sick feeling crawled into my stomach. The camera's red light was blinking, and it wasn't blinking before. We weren't alone. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "You saw something, didn't you?" I nodded. Ben swallowed hard. Was it the voices? I froze. Because if he knew about the voices, that meant he had heard them too. None of us spoke for a long moment. Then I finally said it. "The system knows our names. Ben's breath hitched. Elena just closed her eyes, like she already knew what was coming next, like she had been waiting for it. I leaned in. Jared figured something out before he disappeared. Something about how the system, whatever it really is, locks onto us. And I think I know how it starts. Elena opened her eyes. How? I swallowed hard. It learns our names. Ben paled. You're saying, as long as it doesn't know who we are, we're not part of it. I finished. We all sat there. The silence thick. The hum of the facility buzzed around us. And then Elena whispered something that made my skin crawl. What happens when it learns all of us? The thought sent a bolt of ice through my spine. Because she was right. It wasn't hunting randomly. It wasn't picking people at random. It was learning us, one by one. And Jared was just the first. I wanted to tell them about the log, about a word, but I was terrified that saying it out loud would somehow make it real. So instead, I said, we need to get out. Ben snorted. Right, just walk out the front door. You saw what happened to Jared. They erased him. If we try to leave, they'll do the same to us. Elena's voice was tight. Then we don't leave through the front door. I sat up straighter. Ben frowned. Elena leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. I've been looking at the network infrastructure since we got here. This place isn't just one facility. It's connected to something else. I felt my pulse pick up. What kind of something? She hesitated. Something deep underground. Ben and I exchanged looks. Like another lab? He asked. Elena shook her head. Like a whole other section of the facility that we were never meant to see. I thought of the long tunnels, the locked security doors, the strange distant hum that sometimes vibrated through the walls at night. And I realized she was right. This wasn't just a lab. It was a hive, and we were in the top layer. Elena exhaled. If there's a way out, it's down there, somewhere past the restricted areas. Ben looked skeptical. So what? We just sneak into a place we're not supposed to be, and hope we don't end up like Jared. Elena's eyes were dark. If we don't, we'll end up like him anyway. We didn't say anything after that, because we all knew she was right. This wasn't a job anymore. It was a countdown. And if we didn't get out soon, we wouldn't exist anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. 2:14 a.m., like clockwork. The whispers started. And this time, they weren't just calling my name. They were laughing, like they already knew what was coming. Like they were waiting for me to make my next move. Like they knew that no matter what I did, I wasn't getting out. The next morning, Elena had a plan. She had spent half the night mapping out what she could from the facility's internal network. The restricted areas were deep, buried under layers of security. But there was something strange in the logs, an access pattern that didn't match any of the guards' schedules. Something is moving down there, she said. Or someone. And whatever it is, it doesn't follow normal human patrols. Ben ran a hand down his face. You're saying it's what? Automated? Elena hesitated. Not exactly. It's erratic. Sometimes it's down there for hours. Sometimes it moves fast, like it's checking different sectors. But the strangest part, it doesn't always return to the same place. I frowned, like it's searching for something. Elena nodded. We sat in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on us. The system wasn't just watching, it was looking for something. And if it was anything like what happened to Jared, we did not want to be on the receiving end. We go tonight, she finally said, before it finds one of us next. Ben sighed, rubbing his temples. If we even make it that far, do we have a choice? I asked. None of us answered. That was all the confirmation I needed. We didn't have a choice. We were running out of time. We kept our heads down for the rest of the day, acted normal, fixed minor issues in the network, ran routine maintenance checks. But something felt different. The guards watched us longer when we moved through the halls. Their radios whispered more than usual, voices low and quick. And then there was the sound. At first I thought I was imagining it, but as the day wore on, I knew I wasn't the only one hearing it. A deep mechanical hum, vibrating through the walls, low, constant, like something beneath us had woken up. That night, we met in Elena's room. She had stolen a keycard from one of the security desks during her shift, swiping it when the guard wasn't paying attention. It wasn't a high-level clearance card, but it might be enough to get us past the first checkpoint. Ben carried a small toolkit, hidden under his jacket. "If we need to hotwire a panel, I can give it a shot," he muttered. I had grabbed a flashlight, but something in my gut told me that if we had to turn it on, we were already dead. "Once we're in," Elena whispered, "we move fast. No stopping, no second guessing. If we see something we're not supposed to, we keep moving. We don't get distracted." I nodded. "And if we get caught," Ben exhaled, "then we don't come back." I tried not to think about what that meant. The entrance to the lower levels was located in the eastern wing of the facility. We moved fast, sticking to the blind spots in the cameras. The door was guarded, but luck was on our side. At exactly 11:43 p.m., the shift rotation happened. We had 60 seconds. Elena swiped the keycard. The door clicked. We stepped through, and then we were inside. The first thing that hit me was the air. It was cold, stale, like it had been sitting undisturbed for years. The walls were concrete, stretching into long, featureless hallways. Dim red emergency lights lined the ceiling, casting everything in a dull blood-colored glow. There were no sounds except for our footsteps. The further we walked, the worse the feeling got, like the walls themselves were pressing in, like something was waiting, watching. We reached the first security checkpoint, a reinforced steel door with a biometric scanner. Our stolen keycard wasn't going to cut it here. Ben knelt down, pulling out his tools. "Give me 30 seconds. Elena and I stood behind him, glancing over our shoulders. The hallway stretched back into the darkness, silent and empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't empty at all, that something else was already down here with us. The scanner beeped. Ben exhaled. "Got it." The door slid open with a hiss. Beyond it, the hallway split into two directions. One path led into a storage area, filled with old, rusted equipment. The other led deeper into the facility, toward the source of that low mechanical hum. Elena didn't hesitate. "We go forward." We stepped through, and the second the door closed behind us, the lights flickered. Then the speakers crackled to life. A voice whispered through the static, not a recorded message, not a security alert. A voice, calm, cold, amused. "I see you." The voice over the speakers sent a spike of ice through my veins. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't issuing a warning. It was calm, watching, amused, like it had been waiting for us to make this mistake. Elena didn't move. She didn't breathe. None of us did. Then the lights flickered again, once, twice, and the hum beneath our feet grew louder. Ben whispered, "What do we do?" Elena finally exhaled, her voice barely audible. "We keep moving." She was right. We had no other choice. The deeper we went, the colder it got. The hallways weren't just abandoned. They were forgotten. The walls had cracks in them. Some of the ceiling panels had collapsed. Wires hung loose, swaying slightly. Dust clung to every surface, undisturbed, but the power was still on. That was the part that made my skin crawl. The lights flickered. The emergency systems were still running. Something down here was still alive. The hallway led to a security gate. Thick steel bars blocked our path, the kind you see in old detention facilities. Behind it, the hallway opened into a large, dark room. I could barely see past the bars, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just another server room. It felt different. It felt wrong. Ben reached for his toolkit. "I can try to." Then the speakers crackled again. Jared tried to leave too. I froze. So did Elena and Ben. The voice wasn't the same one from before. It was distorted, familiar, and I realized, with horror, that I knew exactly who it was. Jared. The voice was warped, like it had been pulled apart and stitched back together. But it was him. He was speaking through the system, through whatever was left of him. Ben backed away from the gate. "This isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't." Then the lights cut out. Total darkness. For a second, I couldn't even hear myself breathe. Then the emergency lights flickered back on. Dim, red. Elena grabbed my wrist. Her grip was ice cold. "Something moved," she whispered. I swallowed, my throat tight. Where? She didn't answer, because the real horror wasn't that something had moved. It was what hadn't. Ben was gone. My brain couldn't process it. I had been right next to him. I should have heard something. A footstep, a scuffle, anything. But there was nothing, just the lingering cold where he had been standing. A moment ago. Elena turned in slow circles, her breathing shaky. Ben, no answer. Ben, silence. I stepped toward the gate, and that's when I saw it. A step toward the gate, and that's when I saw it. A shadow stood behind the bars. Not a person, not a guard. A silhouette, just out of reach. It wasn't moving, but it was there, watching. I couldn't make out any features, only a vague humanoid shape, blending into the darkness. But then, as the lights flickered again, it moved. No footsteps, no sound, just a sudden unnatural shift forward, like a video skipping frames, like reality was glitching around it. And it whispered something, one word, acquired. Elena yanked me back. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. We turned and ran. The hallway twisted into a maze. Every corridor looked the same. The walls seemed closer than before. The lights flickered faster. The sound, the deep mechanical hum, was pulsing, vibrating through the air like a heartbeat. I didn't know where we were going. I only knew that we couldn't stop, because something was following us. Not running, not chasing, but waiting. Elena reached a junction and hesitated. Left or right, it shouldn't have mattered. But it did, because from the left corridor something breathed. A slow mechanical inhale, a broken exhale. We turned right. The doors on this level weren't normal. They weren't labeled, just blank, reinforced steel slabs lining the walls. No windows, no indication of what was inside. But one of them was open, slightly ajar, a faint blue glow spilling from within. I grabbed Elena's arm. We can't. She pushed forward. I didn't stop her, because at that point, anywhere was better than the hallways. Inside was a lab. Old, abandoned. Dust-covered monitors lined the walls, flickering with faint static. And in the center of the room, a chair. Not an office chair, not a hospital bed. A metal restraint chair, bolted to the ground. Straps dangled from the armrests. And just above it, a screen pulsed with 3 words. E-SHIO program online. Elena stepped forward, eyes locked on the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Elena, I whispered. We shouldn't. Then the screen changed. The words vanished, replaced by something else. A single command, typed in real time. Hello, Elena. She froze, her hands clenched into fists. I reached for her, but she didn't move. The screen pulsed again. Another message. Welcome back. My breath hitched. Back. I looked at Elena. She was shaking. Her lips parted slightly, like she was remembering something. Something she had forgotten, or something that had been taken. The air grew heavy. The walls seemed closer. And then the final message appeared. The last thing we saw before the lights cut out again. You never left. The screen blinked off, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, there was only silence. And then, a sound, not from the speakers, not from the hallway, from inside the room. Something shifted near the chair. A faint metallic creak, like leather straps, straining against movement. I grabbed Elena's arm, whispering, we need to go, now. She didn't move. Her breath came in shallow, shaking gasps. Her eyes were locked on the chair, but I could tell she wasn't seeing it. She was somewhere else, somewhere deep inside her own head. Remembering, or being remembered. A voice whispered through the dark, welcome back. It wasn't coming from the screen. It was coming from the chair. Elena inhaled sharply. Her hand shot to the side of her head, like she was in pain. I grabbed her shoulder. Elena, we can't stay here. She finally blinked, her eyes wild and unfocused. Then the lights flickered back on. The screen was different now. The words were gone, replaced by something else. A live video feed. My stomach twisted as I realized what I was looking at. It was us, from above, a grainy security feed showing this exact room. The timestamp in the corner read archive footage 3 years ago, and the camera wasn't just watching us. It was watching another version of us. A woman was strapped into the chair. Elena, not this Elena, but one that looked just like her. Same face, same body, same terrified expression. She was struggling against the restraints, mouth moving in silent screams. Two figures in lab coats stood beside her, their faces obscured by the poor video quality. One of them typed something into a console. The other placed a device over Elena's head. She jerked violently, her back arching. The screen glitched, flickering with static. Then the timestamp changed. The same date, but a different version of her. Elena, strapped into the chair again, and again, and again, over and over, like a loop that never ended. She made a choked sound beside me, her knees almost giving out. I caught her just as the screen cut back to black. Her voice was barely a whisper. I was here before. My blood turned to ice, because the system hadn't just recognized her. It had been waiting for her to come back. The speakers crackled to life. The voice was different now. Not the distorted whispers, not Jared. Something else, something more. Human. Elena Miller, Experiment Subject 004. I felt her entire body lock up. You were scheduled for termination. Experiment concluded. Data expunged. Requisition in progress. The screen flickered back on. A new feed. A hallway camera. Someone was walking toward us. Not a guard, not a researcher. A shadow, moving with unnatural stillness. A shape just barely human. And it was getting closer. The voice over the speakers whispered one last time. You never left. Then the door behind us unlocked. Elena snapped out of it, her breathing ragged. Her fingers dug into my arm. We have to go. I didn't hesitate. We ran. The hallways were different now. Before, the facility had felt empty, but now it was awake. The overhead lights flickered wildly. Monitors in passing rooms flashed with images too fast to process. Faces, mouths open in screams, surveillance feeds of rooms that shouldn't exist. A long white hallway lined with identical chairs. A holding cell, a morgue, all of it looping. Flashes of memories that didn't belong to me, but they belonged to someone. Maybe even Elena. A siren blared somewhere in the distance. The red emergency lights deepened, washing everything in blood-colored shadows. I glanced over my shoulder. The thing was still behind us. Not running, not chasing, just waiting, because it already knew where we were going. We reached an intersection and skidded to a stop. Left hallway, a locked gate. Right hallway, a lab filled with flickering monitors. Straight ahead, an elevator. We ran for the elevator. Elena slammed her hand against the button. The doors didn't open, they just blinked at us. A slow mechanical hum vibrated behind them, like something was inside, waiting. Her voice was shaking. The stairs, we have to find the stairs. I turned and everything went wrong. The lights cut out completely. For a split second, we were in absolute darkness, and in that moment, I felt it. Something was standing right behind me, so close I could hear it breathe. Not human breath, something mechanical, something unfinished. I reached for Elena's arm, but she was gone. Panic slammed into my ribs. I turned in every direction, heart hammering. Elena, no answer. The darkness pulsed, stretching in every direction, and then, a single overhead light flickered back on. Not enough to illuminate the entire hallway, just enough to reveal the chair. It wasn't supposed to be here. It hadn't been here before, but now it was, sitting in the middle of the hall, straps undone, screen flickering beside it, and standing just behind it. A figure, not the shadow from before. Something else, someone else. Elena. She was staring at me, but her expression was wrong. Her eyes were empty, her lips moved, but her voice was detached, like an echo of something that had been said a long time ago. You never left. The lights cut out again, and the last thing I heard was the sound of the restraints locking into place. The second the restraints clicked into place, I lunged forward, or at least, I tried. Something held me back, not hands, not restraints. The air itself, it felt thick, like I was wading through something unseen, something pulling me away. I fought against it, against the invisible force pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Elena, I shouted, my voice barely cutting through the static that was now buzzing in my ears. The darkness swallowed the sound. The overhead light flickered back on. Elena was still in the chair. Her arms were limp at her sides. Her face was blank, her lips moving in silent whispers. The screen beside her glowed with a single message: begin reintegration. I forced my legs forward, every step feeling like I was pushing through water. The hum in the walls pulsed, growing louder. The air around me shifted, not like wind, like movement, like something else was here, watching, waiting for me to get closer. The screen flashed. Elena's body jerked violently, her back arching against the chair. A sharp, ragged breath tore from her throat. Her fingers curled, digging into the armrests. I ran. The invisible pressure fought me, slowing my movements, dragging against me, but I kept going. I reached for her. My fingers brushed her arm, and the world collapsed. I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I wasn't anywhere. The chair was gone. The facility was gone. The humming walls, the flickering lights, all of it had vanished. I was standing in a void, a space that stretched forever, empty and vast. It was dark, not just absence of light dark. It was a suffocating nothingness. I turned slowly, looking for anything, and then I saw them. People, dozens of them, standing in the darkness. Their bodies were still, unmoving, like they had been placed there and forgotten. Some wore lab coats, some wore uniforms, but all of them had the same blank expression, eyes open, mouths slightly parted, as if they had been frozen in the middle of a sentence. And the worst part, I recognized some of them. Jared, two of the security guards, the woman from the video feed, strapped in the chair before Elena. None of them moved, none of them blinked. They just stood there, waiting. And I wasn't alone. A voice echoed through the void. Not a whisper, not static. A real voice, calm, cold. You weren't supposed to come back. I turned, my heart pounding. A figure was standing just behind me. Not one of the frozen people, not a guard, someone else. A man, late 50s, dark suit, clean shaven, hair neatly combed back. His face was familiar, but I couldn't place it, like I had seen him before in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. He stared at me, expression unreadable. You were supposed to be erased. The frozen people didn't move, didn't react, but the void itself did. I felt it, a shifting, like something underneath this space was breathing. A pulse, a heartbeat, slow, steady, waiting. The man in the suit tilted his head. You don't remember, do you? My mouth was dry. Remember what? A faint smile, like I had walked into a trap without realizing it. His hands clasped behind his back. The original experiment. The air grew colder. The frozen people, they weren't just still, they were watching now. Eyes locked on me, unblinking, silent, like puppets waiting for their strings to be pulled. The man stepped closer, not walking, gliding, like he wasn't bound by the same physics I was. You signed the contract, just like she did, he said. You agreed to participate. My pulse pounded in my ears. That's not true. His smile widened. The void shuddered. I felt the weight of it pressing in, suffocating, squeezing, like something wanted to pull me under. His voice was softer now. You don't understand what Project E-Echo really is. The void cracked, and everything went black. I woke up somewhere else. The ceiling above me was white, blinding. A harsh, sterile light buzzed overhead. My body felt heavy, like I had been drugged. I turned my head, and my heart stopped. I was back in the chair, straps tight around my wrists, my legs, my chest. The screen beside me flickered on. A single message appeared. Begin reintegration. I thrashed, pulled against the restraints. The leather dug into my skin. The hum in the walls grew louder. The air in the room shifted. And then, the door across the room opened. A figure stepped inside, dressed in the same dark suit, expression calm, voice steady. Welcome back. The man in the suit stepped closer. I could barely breathe, not just from the restraints biting into my skin, not just from the sterile artificial air filling my lungs, but from something else, something in the walls. The hum wasn't just noise anymore. It was inside my head, like it was pulsing through me, sinking to my heartbeat. He stopped just short of the chair, hands clasped behind his back, head slightly tilted, studying me, like I was a specimen, like I wasn't human. The screen beside me flickered. The words on it shifted, processing. Then in slow, methodical keystrokes, the next message appeared. Memory restoration, 38% complete. I felt a sharp sting in my skull, like something digging inside my mind, pulling at threads I didn't know were there. The man watched. His expression didn't change. Not when I jerked against the chair, not when my breath came in ragged gasps, not when I started remembering. It didn't hit all at once. It came in fragments, scattered images, pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. But the edges were wrong. I saw the facility, not in ruins, not abandoned, fully operational. Bright fluorescent lights, hallways filled with people in white coats, guards stationed at doors. I saw myself, walking these halls, not as an intruder, not as a prisoner, but as someone who belonged. I worked here. The thought made me nauseous. I knew it wasn't true. It couldn't be true. But the more I remembered, the harder it was to deny. This place, this experiment, I had been part of it. And so had Elena. The man in the suit spoke. You're starting to understand. His voice was patient, like he had been through this before, like he had seen others strapped into this chair, watching the truth unravel in real time. My voice felt raw when I finally managed to speak. You erased me. His lips curved slightly. Not erased, repurposed. The words sent a wave of nausea through me. Repurposed, like a file, like a program, like something that could be written over and used again. The screen flickered. Another memory ripped through me. I was standing in the control room. Elena was beside me. She wasn't strapped to a chair. She wasn't a test subject. She was one of us. The words echoed in my mind. Sickening. One of us. Her voice was calm, professional. This iteration should hold longer. She was looking at a monitor, watching a man strapped to the chair. His face was blurred in my memory, but the screaming was clear. I gasped back into reality. The light overhead buzzed louder. The hum in the walls grew deeper, like the entire facility was watching, waiting for me to piece it all together. The man stepped closer. His voice was softer now, like he was speaking to someone broken, someone ready to be rebuilt. You were our most successful subject. My fingers curled into fists. He continued. You adapted faster than the others. You integrated seamlessly. I didn't want to listen. I wanted to fight, but the screen kept flickering, and my mind kept unraveling. Elena and I weren't outsiders. We weren't victims. We were part of the system. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the memories out of my head, but it was too late. They were mine. They had always been mine. The screen flickered again. Memory restoration 61% complete. The man in the suit reached forward, pressed something against my temple. A cold metallic device. You're almost ready, he said. The screen flashed. Begin finalization. Then, bang, the door slammed open. For a split second, I thought it was another guard, another doctor, someone coming to push me further into the machine. But it wasn't. It was Elena. She wasn't the same as before. Her expression was wild. Her hair was damp with sweat. Her eyes were clear, not blank, not empty. And in her hands, a gun. The man in the suit barely reacted, only turned to face her, like he had been expecting this. Her hands shook, but she held the gun steady. Get away from him. The man's voice was calm. Elena, we both know that's not how this ends. Something flickered in her expression, a hint of uncertainty. He took a step forward, and that's when she pulled the trigger. The gunshot shattered the hum in the walls. The man in the suit staggered back, clutching his chest, not in pain, in surprise. His fingers pressed into the wound, blinking at her. Then, without another word, he crumpled, falling without a sound, like a puppet with its strings cut. Elena was breathing hard, shaking, the gun almost slipping from her fingers, but she forced herself forward, reaching for the restraints. I was too stunned to speak, too stunned to do anything but watch her. She shouldn't have remembered. She should have been trapped like me, but she had broken free. She undid the last strap and pulled me up. I swayed, my legs almost giving out, but her grip was firm. "Come on," she whispered. "We don't have much time." I swallowed, my throat dry. My mind was still spinning, still trying to process the truth. But right now, that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was getting out. We ran. The alarms were blaring now. The hum in the walls was dying. The facility itself felt like it was collapsing, like it was coming undone from the inside. Elena led the way. She knew where she was going. Somewhere in her restored memories, she had found a way out. And then, the door. The exit. A massive reinforced steel door. Just ahead, just a few feet away. We were going to make it. And then the speakers crackled one last time. A voice that wasn't a voice. A whisper that wasn't a whisper. Something inside the machine itself. "This is not the end." The lights flickered violently, and just before Elena threw the door open, I turned and saw what was waiting in the dark. I turned just in time to see the darkness move, not like a shadow shifting under a flickering light, not like something solid blocking the dim glow of the hallway. It flowed, like ink spreading through water, like something alive, and at the center of it, a shape. It wasn't human, not anymore, not fully. Its form was shifting, bending, breaking apart and rebuilding itself, but I recognized the outline. The suit, the smooth, unreadable face, the man I had just watched collapse. But this wasn't him. It was what was left of him, and it was still here. Elena's breath hitched. She saw it too. She gripped my wrist, voice sharp. "We have to go. Now." But I couldn't move. Not yet, because the thing in the dark was staring at me. Not with eyes, not with anything visible, but I could feel it, something behind those shifting layers of void. It wasn't watching me, it was reading me. The speakers crackled. The voice that wasn't a voice whispered through the walls. "You think you've won." Elena yanked the door handle. A heavy groan of metal filled the air. "You think you're leaving." The void moved. It didn't run. It didn't step forward. It closed the distance without motion, without sound, just a slow collapse of space. And then, it reached for me. I don't remember screaming. I only remember the cold. A sharp biting cold. That wasn't real but felt real. It wrapped around my skull, slithering into my mind, into my thoughts. And I remembered everything. I remembered signing the contract. I remembered sitting in the chair. The screen flickering in front of me. The first test. The first loop. The first time I woke up inside the machine. And I remembered why. The program wasn't about erasing memories. It was about replacing them. I wasn't just a test subject. I wasn't just an employee. I had been something else before all of this. Someone else. Someone the government needed to rewrite. And this was how they did it. Project ECA wasn't a study. It was a correction. A way to overwrite who you were and turn you into something else. And I had been the prototype. The cold slammed deeper into my skull. The void dragged me under. I saw versions of myself. Thousands of me. In the chair. Standing in the hallways. Walking through the labs. Wearing a white coat just like Elena. Each iteration of me. Each cycle. Each failed attempt. And now the system was trying again. It was rewriting. Reintegrating. But this time something was wrong. Elena had broken free. She had done something to the system. A flaw. A crack in the foundation. A reason it was losing control. The void trembled around me. Flickering. Distorting. And I heard her voice. Not from the memories. Not from the past. From right here in the present. "Wake up." The void shattered. I gasped as the cold ripped away from me. My body slammed back into reality. Back into the hallway. Back into the blaring alarms and flickering lights. The door was open. Elena had yanked it wide, exposing the outside. And for the first time, I saw it. Not just the hallway. Not just another layer of the facility. The real outside. The world beyond this place. But the thing in the dark wasn't finished. The whisper shook the walls. The black mass convulsed violently. It wasn't letting me go. Not without a fight. Elena pulled me toward the door. The moment my feet crossed the threshold, the facility itself shifted. The walls rippled. like the entire place had just taken a breath. Then the whisper came one last time. You belong to us. And the world collapsed. Bright light, blinding, white-hot light. The cold was gone. The hum was gone. The machine was gone. I woke up on the ground. Elena was beside me, shaking me. We weren't inside the facility anymore. We were outside. Not in the city. Not in a known location. A field, stretching out for miles in every direction. No fences. No buildings. Just emptiness. The sky above us was wrong. Not blue. Not gray. It was a color I couldn't describe. Like something had tried to paint a sky, but got it just a little off. Like reality itself was struggling to stabilize. Elena looked at me. For the first time I saw fear in her eyes. She wasn't relieved. She wasn't celebrating. She was staring at the sky like she recognized it. Like she had seen it before. And she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. This isn't the real world. A chill crawled up my spine. I sat up slowly, scanning the horizon. Nothing. No buildings. No mountains. No trees. Just an endless stretch of artificial-looking land. The same uncanny feeling as a dream. You half remembered. Something off in the air. In the way the light didn't fully cast shadows. I turned to Elena. If this isn't the real world. My throat felt tight. My voice barely came out. Where are we? She inhaled. Held it for a moment. Then whispered. We never left the machine. Elena's words hung in the air. We never left the machine. My skin crawled. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to argue. To tell myself this was real. Because it had to be. We were outside. We had escaped. But the more I looked around, the more I felt it. The wrongness. The sky was too still. The air was too perfect. There was no wind. No sound of distant wildlife. Not even the faint hum of civilization. Just emptiness. It wasn't natural. It wasn't alive. It was constructed, built, like everything around us had been rendered into place. And the worst part, my body felt lighter, like gravity wasn't fully working, like I was standing in a half-formed space. I swallowed hard. My voice barely came out. How do you know? Elena didn't look at me. She kept staring at the sky. Her voice was hollow. I've seen it before. My stomach twisted. You've been here. She nodded. But it wasn't a normal nod. It was absent, like she was remembering something her mind didn't want to remember. I pushed. When? She took a slow breath. Then she said the last thing I ever expected. When they erased me, I froze. I didn't even blink. Elena turned to me. Eyes dark. Expression blank. This is where they send people when the machine is done with them. A cold chill ran down my spine. She wasn't lying. I knew she wasn't. And the more I stood here, the more I felt it too. This place wasn't real. It was a holding space, a limbo for the ones who had been erased. My heart started pounding. How do we get out? Elena let out a hollow laugh. If I knew that, I wouldn't be here again. Panic clawed at my chest. This was wrong. This was all wrong. We fought to escape. We made it out. But somehow we were still inside. The machine was still holding us. And if this place was what she said, how many others were here? I turned in a slow circle, scanning the endless landscape. I expected to see figures in the distance, other lost souls wandering. But there was nothing, just an expanse of artificial land, stretching forever, or at least, that's what I thought. Until I saw it, far in the distance, a building. It stood alone on the horizon, a massive brutalist structure. No windows, no signs, just towering gray walls. My pulse quickened. Elena followed my gaze. Her entire body tensed. You see it, I whispered. She didn't respond right away. Then, I saw it last time, too. I turned to her. What's inside? Her jaw tightened. She looked at me. And for the first time, I saw real fear. She didn't whisper. She didn't stammer. She just said, that's where they finish the process. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. I could hear it in her voice. She was afraid of that place, which meant we needed to do the one thing I didn't want to do. We needed to go inside. The walk felt endless. Time didn't work right here. Each step felt like it took too long. The closer we got, the more real the building became. The sky dimmed. The air thickened. The world itself seemed to compress around it. And finally, we stood before it. The massive faceless wall. A single metal door. No handle. No keypad. But as soon as we got close, it clicked open. A dark hallway stretched inside. Dimly lit. Silent. Waiting. I turned to Elena. She wouldn't look at me. She was staring inside, like she was trying to force herself to move. Her hands were clenched into fists. She was reliving something that happened last time, something that broke her. I reached for her arm. We go in together. She exhaled sharply, then nodded once, and we stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind us. The hallway stretched forward, impossibly long. Something about it didn't make sense. The walls were too smooth. The floor was too still. It felt like we weren't walking forward at all, like the hallway was just pulling us deeper. Then I started hearing them. The whispers, soft, distant, but growing closer. Elena heard them too. Her steps faltered. I grabbed her wrist. We keep going. The hallway split ahead. Two paths. One veering left, one veering right. The whispers came from both, calling us. I turned to Elena. She was breathing hard, her hands shaking. We can't split up, I said. But her eyes locked onto the left path. And I knew she wasn't going to stop. Before I could stop her, she took off, running into the left hall, her footsteps echoing. I swore under my breath and ran after her. The walls started closing in. The whispers grew deeper. They weren't whispers anymore. They were voices, calling, commanding. And up ahead, the hallway ended with another chair. It was the same chair from the facility. Same straps, same cold metal, same flickering screen beside it. And the second Elena saw it, she collapsed. She hit the floor, gasping for breath, her entire body shaking. I dropped to my knees beside her. She was mumbling, words I didn't understand, repeating something over and over. Her nails dug into my arm, and then she looked up at me. Her pupils were blown wide, her breath ragged, and she whispered, "This is where they made me forget." A chill rushed through me. I turned back to the chair. The screen lit up. One line of text appeared. Final reintegration begins. In 30 seconds, and somewhere behind us, footsteps, getting closer. The footsteps weren't rushed. They weren't frantic, or loud, or clumsy. They were methodical. A slow, deliberate pace. Like whatever was coming didn't need to hurry. It's because it knew we had nowhere to go. Elena was still shaking. Her fingers dug into my arm. Her breath coming fast, uneven. The screen beside the chair flickered. A new line of text appeared. Final reintegration begins in 20 seconds. I swallowed hard. My heart was hammering. We have to move. Elena didn't respond. She was staring at the chair, at the straps, the flickering monitor, the metal frame worn from use. She whispered, "They put me here." I grabbed her shoulders. "Elena, we have to move." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were glazed, unfocused, like she wasn't really here, like she was slipping back into a memory. And the footsteps behind us, they were getting closer. I yanked her up, pulled her forward. We stumbled toward the opposite end of the room. But there was no door, no exit, just the walls, seamless, flat, like this place wasn't meant to be left, like it was designed for one thing, and one thing only. Elena dug her heels into the floor. She turned, her face twisting in terror. I spun around just in time, and saw it. The hallway was darker now, like the shadows had grown thicker, like the walls had stretched further away. And in that deepening darkness, a figure stood, still watching, waiting. My breath caught in my throat. It was the man in the suit, but not him. Not anymore. His form wasn't solid. It flickered, shifted, glitching like corrupted data. One moment, his face was smooth, featureless. The next, it was a blur of distorted motion, like a dozen faces were trying to surface all at once, all erased, all left behind. The footsteps stopped, and a voice came from everywhere at once. "You were never meant to wake up." The screen beside the chair flashed. Final reintegration begins. In 10 seconds, Elena screamed, not in pain, Not in fear, in rage. She ripped herself free from my grip and lunged toward the chair. Before I could stop her, she slammed her fists into the screen. Glass shattered. The text flickered violently, and then the entire room trembled. A deep grinding rumble filled the space, like metal scraping against metal, like something beneath us was waking up. The figure in the hallway didn't move. It just tilted its head, studying us. Then, slowly, it raised one hand. The walls around us started to change. They weren't walls anymore. They were screens, massive, stretching from floor to ceiling. All at once they flickered to life. And what I saw was us, Elena and me, sitting in a white room, hooked to machines, monitors strapped to our heads, unmoving, like we had been there for years, like we were nothing more than data loops playing on repeat. Elena's breath hitched. She stumbled back, her gaze locked onto the image of herself, and I saw it in real time. The moment she realized, the moment she realized, the moment she understood what this was. We weren't just trapped inside the machine. We were the machine. The walls flickered again. The figures on the screens, our other selves, their eyes snapped open. They turned and looked directly at us. And then the voice came one last time. It's time to wake up. The moment the voice spoke, the screens collapsed. Not like breaking glass, like files being deleted. One by one, each version of us on the monitors vanished. Our images, our data, ourselves, erased. Elena clutched my arm. Her fingers dug into my skin hard enough to hurt. We have to wake up. Her voice was sharp, desperate, but I could barely hear it over the sound of everything breaking. The room was folding in on itself, walls stretching, warping. The air felt thinner, like we were standing in a place that was coming undone. The figure in the hallway didn't move. It watched, and even though its face was unreadable, I could feel what it wanted. It wasn't here to stop us. It was here to watch us realize the truth, to let us see what we really were, and then let the machine decide what to do with us. Elena yanked me toward the chair. She was shaking, not from fear, from rage. I had never seen her like this before. Her entire body was trembling, with a furious certainty, like she had spent years forgetting. And now she had finally remembered everything, and it wasn't going to hold her any longer. I hesitated. She turned, eyes wild. If we don't do this now, we'll never leave. She was right. But I wasn't ready, because I understood something now. Something horrible. Something I wasn't supposed to understand. We weren't the first, and we wouldn't be the last. The machine had done this before, to others, over and over. Each time it erased them, remade them, wiped them clean, and started again. And every once in a while, one of them woke up, one of them realized. And that's when the system did something worse than erase them. It kept them, it studied them, it watched them, until they were no longer a threat. And then it threw them away, into this space, this limbo, the place between the machine and the real world, the place where the lost mind stayed. And we had been here before. That was why Elena recognized this place. That was why she had seen the building before. She had already woken up once, and the machine had put her back inside. The chair hummed, the screen beside it glitched violently. More text appeared, forced reintegration initiated, consolidating remaining data, terminating used files. The air turned to ice, the room tilted. I felt my own mind being pulled apart, like the system was scanning every thought, every memory, deciding what to keep and what to erase. Elena grabbed my face, forced me to look at her. Stay with me. Her voice was breaking. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if I could. The black-suited figure stepped forward. The glitching distortion around it pulsed. It lifted a single hand, and the entire room shattered. My stomach dropped. I was falling. Not physically, not through space, through data, through versions of myself. I saw myself in the chair. I saw myself standing in white hallways. I saw every failed attempt at escaping. Every loop, every rewrite, each one a little different, each one closer to the truth. And now I was at the end, the final test, the last chance to wake up. Elena's scream pierced through the chaos. Don't let them take you. I fought. I clawed my way through the collapsing fragments of memories, through the layers of simulations and failed versions of myself. I grabbed onto her hand, and together, we broke through. White light, blinding, overwhelming. For a moment, I thought I had failed. I thought the machine had won, that it had pulled me back under, wiped me clean, that I had been deleted. And then, I opened my eyes. I gasped. Air rushed into my lungs. Real air, cold, sharp, clean. A dull mechanical beeping filled my ears. I wasn't in the simulation anymore. I was in a room, a real one. And I wasn't alone. Elena was beside me, strapped into a chair, monitors attached to her skull. And all around us, the facility stretched out in terrifying clarity. No longer just an endless maze of corridors and loops, but a real physical place, a laboratory. And standing over us, a man in a white coat, expression blank, clipboard in hand, watching us wake up. And behind him, the glass walls of an observation room, where others, more scientists, more people in suits, were watching. Like this was just another test, like we had done exactly what they wanted. The man leaned forward, checked something on his clipboard, then said, in the calmest voice imaginable, "You passed." The moment he said it, I felt my stomach turn. Passed, like this was all some kind of test, like every second of terror, every desperate attempt to escape, was just another step in their experiment. Elena wasn't breathing. She was staring at him, at the clipboard, at the observation room behind him. Her entire body was rigid. I could feel the tension in her limbs, see the pulse in her neck hammering. Then, without a word, she yanked the electrodes off her skin. She ripped free from the chair, staggered to her feet, and lunged for him. The scientist didn't even flinch. 2 guards stepped forward before she could touch him. They caught her mid-air, slamming her against the chair. She screamed, not in pain, in rage, pure, animalistic fury. And in that moment, I understood. We hadn't escaped. We had never escaped. Because escape was never the point. I moved fast, ripped my own monitors off. The guards turned toward me. I threw my chair forward, knocking one of them off balance. Before I could move any further, something cold jammed into my neck. A syringe. Elena's voice snapped into static. My vision blurred. My arms, my legs, stopped working. And before my mind shut down completely, I heard the scientist say one last thing. Calm, measured, almost pleased. Begin phase 2. Darkness. Time stopped making sense. Maybe it was days, maybe hours, maybe years. I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't awake either. I was somewhere in between, floating in a space that wasn't space. And inside that space, a voice whispered, familiar, but wrong. Not my voice, but a version of me, one that wasn't real, one that they had built. And it said, in a voice that sent ice into my blood, you are not the first. You will not be the last. You are not awake. Light slammed back into existence. I gasped, sitting bolt upright, strapped to a new chair. Not the same one from before. A different one, cleaner, more advanced, like they had upgraded me. The scientist stood there, watching, expressionless, clipboard in hand. He nodded. Welcome back. I couldn't breathe. Elena. Where was Elena? I twisted in my restraints, trying to turn my head. Then I saw her, sitting across from me, strapped to an identical chair. Her eyes, they were wide open, too wide, like she was seeing something I couldn't see, something she couldn't escape. She wasn't moving, just staring. And when she finally spoke, her voice was hollow, empty, like a memory of itself. We never woke up. The scientist made a note on his clipboard. Satisfied, he stepped closer and smiled. Let's begin again. The lights flickered, the machine hummed, and I felt my mind being rewritten. For the last time, I never should have opened that email. It came in at 3:17 a.m., a single subject line. I think I woke up. I almost ignored it. I had been half asleep, groggy, scrolling through my phone, trying to lull myself back into unconsciousness. But the name attached to the email, I knew it. Alex Carter, a journalist I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. And when I saw his name, something cold crawled up my spine. Because Alex Carter had been dead for 3 days. I sat up too fast, my heart pounding. Checked the timestamp again. 3:17 a.m. The day was Tuesday. Alex Carter had been reported missing on Saturday. My fingers hovered over my keyboard. It had to be a hoax. Or maybe someone had access to his accounts. Maybe someone wanted me to see this. But my gut twisted in a way that I couldn't ignore. Because Alex Carter and I shared something. A history. A secret. Something we had both agreed to forget. My hands felt clammy as I clicked the email open. There was no body text. Just a single PDF attachment. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to open it. But Alex had never been reckless. If he had risked sending this to me, it meant he had been trying to warn me. I swallowed hard and tapped the file. A scanned document appeared, classified stamped across the top. The header read, Project Aurora, Subject Interview, Log Test Site, Black Site 19 Date, December 2nd, 1997. My blood turned to ice. I knew that name, Project Aurora, a government experiment in controlled consciousness, a program designed to test the limits of sleep, memory and identity, a program that I had been a part of. My vision blurred, because I had spent years convincing myself that none of it had happened, that my memories were just dreams, that I had never been involved. But here it was, in front of me, cold, unforgiving, real. I forced myself to read the transcript. Begin log. Interviewer, please state your name for the record. Subject, 07. I don't know if I should. It changes sometimes. Interviewer, your name changes. Subject, 07. Pause. Sometimes. I wake up and it's different. My driver's license says something else. The people in my house don't look at me the same. The street outside is off. I interviewer, what do you mean by off? Subject, 07. The houses aren't in the same places. The cars are wrong. It's like someone tried to copy my life, but they didn't get it quite right. I interviewer, and how often does this happen? Subject, 07. Every time I go to sleep. My chest tightened. I had read enough. I slammed my laptop shut and gripped the sides of my desk, breathing hard, because I knew what this was, who this was. Subject, 07. I had never known them by name, but I had been in the room with them. I had been there during the experiment, and now 26 years later, someone was sending me their transcript. I felt the urge to move, to pack a bag, to leave town, because I had spent years burying this, and suddenly, it was crawling back up to the surface. I grabbed my phone. My fingers hesitated over the screen. I needed to call someone. But who? There was only one person who would understand. I scrolled through my contacts, found the name, Dr. Elliot Grayson. I hadn't spoken to Grayson in a decade. Not since we had left the program. Not since we had agreed to disappear. But if anyone knew what was happening, it was him. I tapped call, put the phone to my ear, and then, the line connected, but no one spoke. Just static. And then, a whisper. I think I woke up. The call cut off. A dial tone rang in my ear. I stared at my screen. No call history. No number listed. Like the call had never happened. My breath hitched. Something was wrong. I could feel it. In my bones. Like I had already made a mistake. Like something had already noticed me. Like I had already stepped back into the dream. I looked at my laptop. The screen was still black. I didn't want to open it again. Didn't want to see what else was waiting for me. But as I reached for the lid, I heard it. From across the room, a whisper. From the mirror. You never left. And then, the reflection moved. But I hadn't. The mirror shouldn't have moved. But it did. Just a flicker. Just for a second. Like my reflection was out of sync. I didn't move. But it did. And in that moment, I felt it. Something was watching me. I forced myself to breathe, to step away, to ignore the cold crawling feeling on the back of my neck. It was just my nerves, just my mind playing tricks on me. It had to be, because if it wasn't, if what I was seeing was real, that meant something far worse was happening. That meant the experiment wasn't over. I turned away from the mirror, back to my laptop. The email was still there, still open. I hesitated, then clicked back to the transcript. I needed to know, because if subject 07 remembered, that meant I might too. Interview continued. Interviewer, when did you first notice the changes? Subject 07, after the third session. At first I thought it was just stress. Little things seemed off. My apartment smelled different. The air tasted wrong. But then, the people changed. Interviewer, changed how? Subject 07, deep breath. They acted like they knew me. They looked like people I knew, but they weren't. I would mention things we talked about before, and they wouldn't remember. I'd call them by a nickname, and they'd correct me, tell me they never went by that name. Interviewer, and you're sure it wasn't your memory that was failing? Subject 07, I thought that at first, but then I saw my mother. Interviewer, go on. Subject 07, she was right in front of me, smiling, laughing, but I had just been at her funeral a week before. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking, because I remembered something too. Not a funeral, but a misalignment, a moment that had never made sense to me. It was a month after I left the program. I had been trying to rebuild my life, forget everything that happened, convince myself it was just another black project, something that had no lasting effects. Then, one morning, I had woken up to a different apartment. Same layout, same furniture, but the smallest details were wrong. My keys weren't where I left them. The paint on the walls was a different shade. And worst of all, the picture on my nightstand was of a woman I didn't recognize, smiling, leaning against me, holding my hand like we had been together for years. But I didn't know her, and when I checked my phone, there were hundreds of texts from her. A sharp pain stabbed through my skull. I pressed my fingers to my temple, because I had never figured it out. Never figured out if I had imagined it, or if something had rewritten my life. And now I was staring at a classified transcript of someone else who had experienced the same thing. The room felt too quiet, too still, like something was holding its breath. I glanced at the mirror again, just to be sure, and for a moment, I swore there were two reflections staring back at me. One was mine, and one was just a second behind. I snapped my eyes away. No, I wasn't going to feed into this. I needed to focus, find Alex Carter, find Dr. Grayson, and figure out what the hell was happening. I reached for my phone again, typed out a message. Grayson, we need to talk. Now. Sent. The moment it delivered, I grabbed my jacket. I needed to move, sitting in this room alone with the transcript and the mirror. It was getting to me. The walls felt like they were closing in. I needed air. I needed space. I stepped outside. The cold air bit at my skin. The street was quiet, too quiet, like the city was holding its breath. Something about it felt off. The streetlights were too dim. The buildings looked less familiar, like someone had redrawn them overnight, like the world was forgetting itself. I forced myself to keep walking. Grayson's office was only a few blocks away. If he was still there, if he still remembered me, then maybe I wasn't alone in this. Maybe I could still get answers. I checked my phone. No response. I typed again. Grayson, this is urgent. Sent. Then, a notification. An incoming call. My heart leapt. I hit answer, but the moment I did, the call dropped, replaced by a text. A single message. Go back inside. My stomach twisted. I looked around. The street was empty. No one was there. No cars. No voices. Just me, and the feeling that someone was watching. I checked my phone again. No number listed. No call log. Like it had never happened. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. And deep in my gut, I knew I was being guided. Like something was trying to pull me in a certain direction. Like the world was adjusting itself around me, keeping me on a specific path. A path I wasn't supposed to leave. I swallowed hard, checked the street one more time, then turned back toward my apartment, back toward the mirror. And as I reached for the door handle, I saw it, the reflection in the glass, standing there, waiting, smiling, like it had been expecting me all along. I froze in place. The reflection in the glass was smiling, but I wasn't. I couldn't, because I was too scared to move. The smile was wrong, too wide, like my reflection was pleased to see me, like it had been waiting for me to come back, like it knew something I didn't. I forced myself to breathe, to steady my shaking hands, to turn the handle and step inside. The air was stale, too still, like the apartment had been abandoned for days. Even though I had only been gone for minutes, I glanced back at the door, checked the locks, secure, same as I had left them. But then, a whisper, "You shouldn't have come back." The voice was too close, like someone was standing right behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just the empty apartment, just the mirror, waiting. I backed away, heart hammering. Something was wrong, and it was getting worse. I grabbed my phone, checked for messages, still nothing from Grayson, just that one warning. Go back inside. Had that been him? Had it been someone else? Was I walking into a trap, or was I already inside one? I needed answers. I moved to my desk, opened my laptop. The transcript was still on the screen, waiting for me, like it had never left. I scrolled down, forced myself to keep reading. Interview continued. Interviewer. What happened after that? Subject 07. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was stress, exhaustion, whatever. But then, my reflection started acting strange. Interviewer. Strange how? Subject 07. It didn't move right. It would blink too late, smile when I wasn't, tilt its head when I wasn't thinking about it. And the worst part, interviewer. Go on. Subject 07. One night, it didn't move at all. Interviewer. You mean it froze? Subject 07. No, I mean it stopped following me. I walked away, but it stayed. Interviewer. Silence. Subject 07. And when I came back, it was waiting, smiling, like it had been watching me the whole time. I shoved the laptop away. A cold sweat broke across my skin, because I knew that wasn't just Subject 07's story. It was mine too. I looked at the mirror again, carefully, slowly, and I waited. My reflection did the same. Perfect, exact. But then, a flicker, a split-second delay, like it had almost forgotten to move. And then, that same slow knowing smile, like it was pleased I had noticed, like it was glad I was paying attention. I grabbed my phone, dialed Grayson again. This time it rang. My pulse raced. Pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up. And a voice. You're running out of time. Static. The call dropped. I stared at my phone, checked the call log. No number, no history. Like the call had never happened. But I had heard it. I had heard him. I forced myself to move, to get out of that chair, to get away from the mirror, because I suddenly knew I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not anymore. I grabbed my bag, shoved my laptop inside. I wasn't sleeping here. I wasn't staying here. If Grayson was still out there, if he was still himself, I had to find him before it was too late. I moved toward the door, reached for the handle. Then, I hesitated. Something felt off. The apartment wasn't the same. The furniture was wrong. The walls looked slightly different, like someone had reconstructed it from memory. From a memory that wasn't mine. Like I had already moved into the next version. Like I had already been replaced. A tremor of panic rippled through me. I had to move. I had to leave before it happened again. I yanked open the door and froze, because in the hallway, standing perfectly still, was me, staring back, expressionless, unmoving, waiting, like it had been expecting me all along. I couldn't move, because I was staring at myself, standing in the hallway, expressionless, still, like a mannequin wearing my face. My mind refused to make sense of it, because it wasn't possible. It wasn't real. And yet, there it was. I was standing outside my own apartment. The other me didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. It just stood there, waiting, watching. A cold sweat dripped down my back. My hands tightened around my bag. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Was I seeing things? Was this another side effect of the experiment? Or was this something worse? Something that had been waiting for me to wake up? I swallowed hard. Who are you? My own voice sounded weak, like I wasn't sure I wanted an answer. The other me tilted its head, slight, slow, and then it smiled. That same too wide smile from the mirror. Like it knew something I didn't. Like it had been expecting me all along. I stepped back. My foot hit the edge of the doorway. My breath shuddered. The apartment behind me felt wrong. But the hallway felt worse, because if I had just left my apartment, then where the hell had this version of me come from? The air felt thick, like something was pressing against reality, like something was waiting to take my place. My throat tightened. I couldn't stay here, couldn't let it reach me. I grabbed the doorframe, braced myself, then I slammed the door shut, locked it, bolted it, pressed my back against the wood, breathing hard. The silence stretched. I squeezed my eyes shut, tried to slow my racing pulse, tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, that I was just tired, that it was all in my head. Then, knock and knock, soft, steady, like a rhythm I should recognize, like something testing the boundary. And then, a whisper, "Let me in." No, 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 no. My entire body tensed. I clamped a hand over my mouth, like that would somehow make me invisible, like that would somehow make it go away. But the whisper came again. "You left the door open last time." My stomach dropped, because I knew it was telling the truth. This wasn't the first time. This wasn't the first version of me. I had woken up before. I had tried to leave before, and every time I did, I ended up right back here, like something had reset the world around me, like I had already lost track of how many times I'd been replaced. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressed harder against the door. I wouldn't open it. Not this time. Not again. Silence. For a long moment, I thought it was over. That maybe, I had made the right choice. That whatever was on the other side had given up. Then, a sound that made my skin crawl. Scraping, like nails dragging down the wood. Like something was waiting. Like it could afford to be patient, because it knew I wouldn't be able to escape. Not forever. I forced my body to move. I needed to get out. Find Grayson. Find anyone who could help me. Because the longer I stayed here, the more the world was shifting. I grabbed my bag, turned away from the door. My heart was pounding. I made my way back to the mirror, because I needed to know, needed to see. And when I did, I realized the truth. Because the mirror was no longer showing my apartment. It was showing something else, somewhere else. And in the reflection, the door was already wide open. I stared at the mirror. The reflection wasn't mine anymore. It was a different version of my apartment. And the door was open. My breath caught in my throat, because I knew I had locked the door, had bolted it, had pressed my entire body against it to keep it shut. And yet, in the mirror, it stood wide open, like I had never closed it at all, like I had never left. I took a step back. A cold, crawling feeling spread down my spine, because I wasn't just looking into a reflection anymore. I was looking into a different version of my life, a version where I had never escaped, a version where I had never realized the experiment was still happening, a version where something else had walked through that door. I had to get out. I turned away from the mirror, grabbed my bag, didn't even check my phone. I already knew there wouldn't be any messages, because the version of me that had been trying to leave wasn't the one that was supposed to. And now something was correcting that mistake. I moved fast, rushed to the door, pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Then, a click, soft, faint, like the lock had just turned. From the outside, I jerked back, heart hammering. I knew I had locked it. I had felt the deadbolt slide into place. And yet, now it was open again. The handle twitched, turning, slow, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side knew I was standing there, like they were waiting for me to realize it. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. I spun around, scanned the room. No other exits, no windows big enough to climb out of, no way to escape, except the mirror. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to look. didn't want to see what was on the other side. But I had no choice, because whatever was outside this room, it wasn't me, and if it got in, it would take my place. The handle turned again. Then, a whisper, "You've been here before." I sprinted for the mirror, because I couldn't wait, couldn't let whatever was outside reach me. If the experiment was still happening, if I was still trapped in the loop, then maybe the only way out was through. The moment I got close, the reflection changed. It rippled, like water disturbed by a single silent breath. And in that ripple, I saw all of them, versions of me. Hundreds, thousands, all standing in different rooms. Some staring into mirrors, some looking over their shoulders, some trapped in darkness, some reaching for something, or someone, that wasn't there. And then I understood. The experiment never ended, because I never left. I had been moving through versions of myself this whole time. Different realities, different copies, and something had been guiding me back. The whisper came again, from behind me, soft, close, choose. I didn't hesitate. I reached forward, pressed my hand to the glass, and the moment I did, the mirror swallowed me whole. Darkness, a sudden rush of air, like falling through a void, and then, silence, a deep stretching silence, like the world had stopped breathing. Then, light, a flicker, then a room, familiar, too familiar, because it was mine, but not mine. I was standing in my apartment again. Everything was exactly the same. The desk, the laptop, the door, the mirror, except one thing was different. The door was locked, and this time, the reflection in the mirror wasn't moving at all. I watched, waited, stared at the glass for a long time, but the other me didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't follow my movements, because for the first time, I was the reflection. I stared at the mirror, and for the first time, it didn't stare back. My reflection was motionless, frozen, like it was waiting for something, for me to realize, for me to catch up, and deep down I already knew. I wasn't on this side anymore. I was inside. I was the reflection now. A cold, numbing terror wrapped around my chest, because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to wake up, to be free, to finally escape the loop. But instead, I was trapped, on the wrong side. I pressed my hand to the glass. Nothing, no ripple, no movement, no sign that the mirror was still a door. Just cold, solid glass. Just an empty apartment beyond it. An apartment that looked exactly like mine, but wasn't, because I wasn't in it anymore. I tried to breathe, to keep myself from panicking. There had to be a way out. There was always a way out, wasn't there? A sound echoed behind me, low, distant, like a hum rising from the darkness. I turned, and froze, because the mirror wasn't just a mirror anymore. It was a window, and behind me, there were others. They stood in the shadows, silent, still, too many to count. Figures that looked like me, but weren't me. Some had missing eyes, some had too wide smiles, some had faces that flickered, like they were still trying to decide who they were supposed to be. And all of them, every single one, were watching me. A sharp pulse of fear raced through my chest. I stepped back, pressed myself against the glass, tried to force myself to wake up, to break the illusion, but the glass was cold, unmoving. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't just another version. It was something else. The figures began to move, slow, glitching, flickering closer, like their bodies were sliding forward in frames, not walking, not shifting, just appearing, bit by bit, step by step, coming toward me. I turned back to the mirror, slapped my hands against the glass. Let me out, my voice echoed, rattled inside this hollow space. But the apartment on the other side stayed empty. My reflection stayed frozen, and the figures behind me didn't stop. You left the door open, a voice, low, soft right behind me. I didn't want to turn, I didn't want to see, but I had no choice. I spun around, and standing inches away was me. Not just a version of me, not one of the broken ones, not one of the glitching ones. This one was perfect, exact, an exact copy, right down to the fear in my eyes. I fixed it, it whispered. It smiled, that same too wide smile. You don't belong here anymore. Something cold and sharp slammed into my chest. Pain rippled through me. I gasped, looked down. The other me had its hand inside my chest. Not stabbing, not tearing, just reaching, like it was grabbing something I couldn't see. My vision blurred. Darkness crept in at the edges. I tried to fight it, tried to pull away, but my body wasn't listening. It's already done. The whisper came again, right next to my ear. And then, everything collapsed. Light, a hum of electricity, a faint beeping noise. I opened my eyes. I was lying on my back, on something hard. The ceiling above me was white. A light flickered overhead. For a moment my mind struggled to catch up. I wasn't in my apartment. I wasn't in the mirror. I was in move for a bed. A hospital bed. Straps were tight around my wrists. Something was attached to my temple. I turned my head, saw a figure standing beside me, watching, taking notes. And then, it spoke. Welcome back, Subject 12. I felt my breath catch. My mind snapped into focus. Subject 12. Not Subject 07. Not the name I had before. A new number. A new version. A new start. Because I had never escaped. I had only been reset, like all the others before me. Like all the others who thought they could leave. And deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. I couldn't breathe. Not because I was hurt, not because the straps on my wrists were too tight, but because I knew what had just happened. I had been reset, again, and this time. I remembered. The figure standing next to my bed was watching me carefully. They held a clipboard, a tablet, something they were using to record my reaction, like I was some kind of test subject. And the worst part, I turned my head slightly, forced myself to take in the room. It was sterile, bright, a place that was meant to look like safety. But I knew better. I recognized it. From the fragments of memory slipping back into my mind. I had been here before. I had woken up in this exact bed. Not just once, but many times. I swallowed hard, tried to calm my breathing, tried to pretend that I was confused, that I didn't remember, that I wasn't aware. Because if they knew that I wasn't supposed to remember, that I had somehow broken the cycle, they'd try to fix it. And I couldn't let them. Not this time. The figure finally spoke. How do you feel? Their voice was calm, professional, like this was just another routine checkup, like I was just another patient. I kept my expression neutral, blinking slowly, like I was processing everything for the first time, like I hadn't just watched myself die, like I hadn't just been pulled out of the mirror. I don't know, I said carefully. My voice was hoarse, like it hadn't been used in days. Where am I? The figure tilted their head slightly, watching, measuring. Then they wrote something on the clipboard, like they had just confirmed something important. You're in a recovery ward, they said smoothly. You were experiencing some cognitive displacement, but you're safe now. We're monitoring your progress. Cognitive displacement, that was their word for it. For what had just happened to me, for the way I had been dragged through endless versions of myself, for the way I had been replaced, reset, like a corrupted file that needed rewriting. I swallowed again, tried to sit up. The restraints were tight, not painful, but secure, like they were there just in case I figured it out, just in case I started asking the wrong questions. How long have I been here? I asked. The figure didn't hesitate. 4 days. 4 days. A lie, a calculated one, meant to make me think I had been here all along, that nothing had happened, that I had just imagined everything. I forced myself to nod slowly, like I believed them, like I was just a confused patient waking up from a bad dream. And for now, that was the role I had to play, because if I wanted to escape, I had to do it differently this time. The figure checked the monitors beside my bed. They glanced at my vitals, wrote more notes. Then finally, they reached up and unbuckled my wrist restraints. I kept my expression calm, didn't move too fast, didn't give them a reason to doubt me, even though my mind was racing, even though I wanted to run, even though I wanted to scream. because I knew what this place was, and I knew what they were doing to me. They set the clipboard down, met my eyes with a calculated smile. Get some rest, Subject 12. You're safe now. Then, they turned, walked to the door, and left. The lock clicked behind them. I sat completely still, waited, counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then slowly, I exhaled, because now I was alone, and that meant I could finally search for answers. I pushed myself upright. The hospital gown felt strange against my skin, like it didn't belong to me, like it had been placed on a different version of me, a version that had been here before, a version that had been reset. I ignored the thought, focused. I had to figure out what was real. The room was small, clean, too clean, like no one had ever really lived in it. Just a bed, a chair, a single mirror bolted to the wall. My chest tightened. The mirror, a perfect rectangle of glass, clear, empty. But I knew better. I knew what mirrors really were. Not reflections, not glass, doors. I moved toward it, heart pounding. Watched my own reflection, watched for any sign that it wasn't really me. That it was something else, something waiting, something watching, something deciding whether I was ready to leave. The air felt different now. The room felt smaller, like I was being watched from all sides, like the walls were listening, waiting for me to make a mistake, to slip, to forget my role, to break the illusion. I reached up, pressed my fingers against the mirror, waited, nothing. Then bab. Then, a flicker, a shape, just behind me, dark, unmoving. But there, I spun around, nothing. My pulse thundered. I hadn't imagined it. I had seen something, and that meant the experiment wasn't over. Not even close. I turned back to the mirror, and that's when I saw it. The reflection of my door, unlocked, wide open, even though I had heard it lock, even though I had seen them shut it behind them. And standing just outside, a shadow, waiting, watching, smiling, like it had been expecting me all along. The shadow stood just beyond the open door, watching, waiting, like it had been expecting me. A slow, paralyzing dread spread through my limbs. I had heard the door lock. I had seen them shut it behind them. And now it was wide open. And something was standing there. Something that wasn't supposed to be. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't let my face betray the raw panic coiling in my gut. Because I knew something was wrong. Very, very wrong. The figure tilted its head. The gesture was small, almost curious, like it was trying to understand me, like it was waiting for me to understand it. And then, it spoke. You remember too much. The words weren't whispered, weren't threatening. They were calm, measured, like an observation, like a fact, like a correction. And somehow, that was worse. I didn't respond, didn't dare move closer, because my instincts were screaming at me, telling me that if I acknowledged it, if I let myself believe this was real, it would become real. And then, I wouldn't be able to wake up again. The figure took a step forward, not walking, not shifting, just appearing, closer, like the space between us had simply vanished, like distance didn't apply to it. And suddenly, it was right in front of me. I barely stopped myself from flinching, barely held my breath steady, because I knew it wanted to see me react. I forced my expression to stay blank, tried to look confused, tried to play along, because if the experiment was still running, if I was still trapped inside it, then I couldn't let them know I had figured it out. The figure tilted its head again, a fraction, too precise, too calculated, like it wasn't a person at all, like it was something pretending to be. And the longer I stared, the more I realized, the less human it became. The skin was off, not unnatural, not grotesque, just empty, like a mask that hadn't finished forming, like something was still deciding what I should see. And that's when I knew, it wasn't real, it was part of the system, a safeguard, a correction, something they had sent to erase me. A sharp, sickening fear spread through my chest. I wanted to move, wanted to run, wanted to wake up, but I wasn't asleep. I was trapped in the memory of waking up, stuck inside another version of myself. And this thing knew. The moment the realization hit, The figure smiled. The expression was slow, too smooth, like someone learning how to do it. And then, the lights flickered. Darkness washed over the room. A static hum filled the air. Not loud, not sharp, just present, like a wall of sound, like a constant humming breath. And in that brief moment of darkness, I saw something. The figure's face changed, not like shifting features, not like morphing skin, just a new version of me. One that looked older, more exhausted, more worn out, like it had been here longer, like it had been through this before. And for the briefest second, I understood. This wasn't the first time I had been reset. Not even close. The lights flickered back on. The figure was still standing there, still wearing that too wide smile. But now, I could see the edges of its illusion slipping. I could see the fragments of different faces, like it was struggling to hold its shape, like I had seen too much. You need to forget, it murmured, not a command, a request, a plea, like it was fighting against something, like it didn't want to be doing this. And suddenly, I realized the truth. This wasn't just part of the experiment. It was another version of me, a version that had been reset so many times, that it had become part of the system, a version that had given up trying to escape, a version that had become the thing keeping me inside. A slow crawling horror wrapped around my thoughts. I was fighting myself, not an AI, not a scientist, not some outside force, just the versions of me that had already lost. And if I wasn't careful, I was going to become one of them. I took a deep breath, steadied my voice, and finally, I spoke. No. The figure blinked. The smile faltered, like it hadn't expected me to refuse, like it hadn't prepared for that answer. And for the first time I saw fear in its expression. Not anger, not frustration, fear. And that's when I knew. It wasn't all powerful. It wasn't unbeatable. It was just like me, a version that had made the wrong choice. And now, it was trying to convince me to make the same one. I took a step forward. The figure didn't move, didn't stop me, didn't speak, because I had already broken its illusion. I had already seen through it, and once I had done that, it couldn't hold me here anymore. I reached for the door, gripped the edge. The figure watched me carefully, silent, breathing slow, like it was waiting for me to change my mind, like it was hoping I would. But I didn't. I wouldn't. I had made my choice. I pulled the door open. Beyond it, the hallway stretched into endless darkness, a void of shifting shapes, memories, fragments of other versions of myself, some trapped, some screaming, some standing perfectly still, watching, waiting, hoping I would turn back, hoping I would stay. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. This was my only chance. And this time, I was going to end this, once and for all. I stepped through, and the door slammed shut behind me. The moment I stepped through the door, the world collapsed. The hallway didn't just stretch into darkness anymore. It melted, shifted. The walls flickered like bad reception, static humming in my ears. I felt my body falling before I even realized I had no floor beneath me. Then, silence. I woke up somewhere else. Again, my eyes snapped open. The first thing I saw was a ceiling. Plain, white, clean. A ceiling I had seen before. A ceiling I recognized. And in that moment, I wanted to scream. Because I was back in the hospital bed, strapped tight around my wrists, monitors beeping beside me, just like before. Like I had never left. Like I had never figured anything out. Like I had just been reset all over again. But this time, something was different. I wasn't alone. A figure stood at the foot of the bed, watching me. Silent, motionless, not holding a clipboard, not taking notes, just standing there, like it was waiting for me to wake up, like it had been waiting for a long time. And as my vision cleared, I recognized it immediately. It was me, again. But this version wasn't like the others. It wasn't glitching, it wasn't smiling, it wasn't shifting between faces or trying to erase me. No, this one looked tired, exhausted, like it had been trapped here longer than anyone, longer than I ever would have imagined. And when it finally spoke, its voice was my own. You should have stopped trying to escape. A slow creeping dread wrapped around my ribs. The weight of it settled into my bones, not because I was afraid, not because I didn't understand, but because, deep down, I already knew what it was going to say, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Every time you run, it continued, voice quiet, it just starts over, a new you, a new version, a new cycle, and every time you break out, you make another one of us. I swallowed hard, tried to force my thoughts to stay steady, because this was a trick, it had to be. It was part of the system, part of the experiment, part of the lie, wasn't it? How do you know? I asked, my voice hoarse. The other me tilted his head slightly, not in that unnatural way like the others. This time it felt genuine, like he was thinking, remembering, like he had been through all of this before. And when he finally answered, it wasn't what I expected, because I was the first version, the original. And suddenly, I understood, he wasn't just another failed escape, he wasn't just another broken version, he was the one who started this, the first experiment, the first subject, and every attempt to break free, every time one of us tried to get out, it created another copy, another version, another prisoner. And now there were so many of us. A deep suffocating nausea hit me. My entire body felt like it was locking up, like my mind was trying to reject the realization, because if he was right, if he was telling the truth, then I wasn't the real one anymore. And maybe I never had been. I tried to sit up, tried to force my body to move. The restraints dug into my wrists. I struggled, fought against them, tried to wake up, to break through, because this wasn't possible. This wasn't how it ended. This wasn't, you can't wake up, the other me said softly, because there's nothing left to wake up to. A sharp electric jolt of panic shot through my chest. I shook my head, felt my heart hammering too fast, too hard, like I was on the edge of something I couldn't handle. That's not true. But the look in his eyes told me. It was. We've all tried, he murmured. Every single one of us. We all thought we were different, that we'd be the one to escape. But none of us did. None of us ever will. I felt something crack inside me, a cold, shattering feeling, because that wasn't possible. That couldn't be the truth. I had come so far. I had seen the cracks, the pieces of reality breaking apart. I had watched the system glitch, falter, fail. That meant it could be destroyed. That meant I could still win, didn't it? The other me sighed, a slow, weary sound, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't trying to trap me. He wasn't trying to convince me to stay. He was just tired of watching this happen over and over again, tired of losing, tired of being replaced. And then he said something that made my blood turn to ice, something that made my mind unravel, something that made me finally understand. Even if you escape, there's nowhere left to go. I stared at him. The words didn't make sense. They didn't register. Because how could that be? Even if it was all a lie, even if I had been reset 1,000 times, there was still a real world, wasn't there? Something beyond this experiment, something waiting for me. But the way he looked at me, the way his expression darkened, I knew what he meant. This wasn't just a prison. This wasn't just an experiment. This was everything. There was no outside world, no real version of me waiting beyond the mirrors, because the experiment never ended. It was all there ever was, all there ever would be, and I was just another copy, trapped inside it. I felt my breath catch, my vision swam, a slow creeping numbness wrapped around my mind, because if that was true, if that was really truly true, then I had only two choices. I could keep running, keep fighting, keep creating more versions of myself, keep this loop going forever, or I could stop, right here, right now, and finally end it. For all of us, I met my own eyes, took a slow shaking breath, and whispered, "Tell me how to stop it." The room felt smaller, the air thicker, like the walls were closing in. Like the moment I said those words, "Tell me how to stop it," something shifted, something in him, something in me, something in me, something in this place. And for the first time, the other version of me, the first me, looked afraid. You don't want to know. A sharp chill ran down my spine. Because I did. I had to. There was no other option. If everything he said was true, if there really was no outside world left, then the only thing I could do was end this. For good. I pulled against the straps, felt the leather dig into my wrists, and I wasn't sure if it was the room tilting, or just my mind fracturing, but everything felt wrong. The ceiling felt too high. The bed felt too deep. The air itself felt alive, like it was watching me, like it was waiting to see what I would do next. And when I looked back at the other me, I saw something shift in his face, like he was hesitating, like he was about to tell me something he wasn't supposed to. If you end it, he murmured, we all go with it. Every version, every copy, every possibility. We won't exist anymore. My heart clenched, because I understood. I really truly understood. If this was all there was, if the world beyond was gone, then that meant we weren't just trapped inside the experiment. The experiment was us. We were the experiment. And the only way to break the cycle was to erase it. Erase us, erase everything. I felt my breath shudder in my lungs, because the truth wasn't just horrifying. It was final. There was no escaping, no waking up, no walking out of the facility and breathing fresh air. That world had been gone for a long time. All that was left was this endless loop. And if I wanted to end it, I had to destroy the only thing keeping it alive. Myself. How? I whispered. Because there was no turning back now. No what if, no maybe, just the choice. And the first me, the version that had started it all, finally let out a breath, like he had been holding it for years, like he had been waiting for someone to figure it out. And he whispered the answer. You have to find the first dream, the original, the one where this all began, and you have to end it before it starts. The first dream, the one that started the entire experiment, the one I had forgotten, the one that created us, and I had to destroy it before it created the loop again, before it created another copy, before it created another me. I didn't know how, didn't know if I would even survive it, but I had come too far to stop now. And if this was the only way, then I would do it. I had to, for all of us. The straps loosened, not from my struggling, not from some hidden mechanism. They just let go, like the system knew, like it was already unraveling. Because I had said the words, because I had made the decision, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, stood up, and the room began to change. The walls stretched, the lights dimmed, the ceiling pulled away like I was falling into the sky. And suddenly, I wasn't in the hospital room anymore. I wasn't in the experiment. I was somewhere else, somewhere before it all began, somewhere that felt familiar. And then I saw it. A single door, not white like the facilities, not heavy metal like the labs, just a wooden door, with a brass handle, like something you'd find in an old house. And the moment I saw it, I remembered. This was it, the first dream, the place where the experiment truly began. This was the moment everything had gone wrong, the moment the first version of me had stepped through, the moment that created the loop. And if I wanted to end it, I had to stop myself from going inside. I stepped forward, felt the ground tilt beneath me, the air thinned, pulling at my skin like static. But I didn't stop, didn't hesitate. I reached for the handle, and then I saw him, another version of me, but not one of the others, not the ones who had been reset, not the ones who had been broken by the system. No, this one was different. This was the very first, the one who had walked into the experiment for the very first time, the one who had started all of this. His hand was already on the handle, already turning it, already about to make the same mistake again, and I had seconds to stop him. I ran, threw myself forward, reached for his arm, grabbed him, and the moment our skin touched, time cracked. A deafening sound ripped through the air. Not thunder, not static, something bigger, something that sounded like an entire world splitting in half. And suddenly, everything collapsed. I woke up, really woke up, not in the facility, not in the experiment, just in a room, in a real bed, a real ceiling overhead, a real world outside the window, the sound of birds, the hum of a city, like none of it had ever happened, like I had just woken up from a long dream. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw only one reflection. No copies, no glitches, no versions of me waiting in the shadows, just me. And for the first time in a long time, I knew the experiment was over. It would never restart again, because there was only one of me now. And that meant it was finally truly done. I don't know why I signed up. It was supposed to be easy money, just a government-funded sleep study, testing lucid dreaming, no drugs, no invasive procedures, just 2 weeks in a comfortable research facility, while they monitored my sleep. I needed the cash. The flyer promised $5,000 for participants who completed the full study. Seemed like a no-brainer. I had no idea what I was really signing up for. The facility was nicer than I expected. Clean, quiet. The researchers were polite, professional. They gave me a thorough exam, ran some cognitive tests, and wired me up to monitors that tracked brainwaves and eye movement. Each night, I fell asleep in a comfortable bed in a small, windowless room, while cameras recorded my REM cycles. They asked me questions every morning. Did you experience anything unusual? Did you see anything strange in your dreams? At first I had nothing to report. I barely even dreamed at all. But by night 3, everything changed. That night, I felt myself sink into sleep, but I didn't feel alone. The moment my body drifted off, it was like I was somewhere else entirely. I wasn't in the facility anymore. I was in a house I didn't recognize. A small, dimly lit room with floral wallpaper and an old wooden dresser. A mirror stood in the corner, reflecting the warm glow of a bedside lamp. I looked down. I was wearing a pale blue nightgown. The fabric felt real, more real than any dream I'd ever had. I walked toward the dresser, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. A perfume bottle sat on top, next to a framed black and white photo of a couple. The man's face was blurred out. The woman looked familiar, too familiar. I leaned in closer, heart pounding. The woman in the photo was me, but I didn't recognize the place. I didn't recognize the time period. I didn't remember ever taking that photo. The door creaked behind me. My stomach tightened. I turned around and woke up screaming. The researchers rushed in, flipping on the lights. I was drenched in sweat, my hands trembling. Dr. Lively, the lead researcher, sat down beside me. "It's okay," he said. "You were dreaming. Just tell us what you remember." I could barely get the words out. It felt too real. Dr. Lively nodded, scribbling notes on his clipboard. "That's normal in this stage of the study. We're stimulating lucid dream activity. Your mind might fabricate entire memories as part of the process." I shook my head. It wasn't fabricated. I was in a different place, wearing different clothes, and I saw a picture of myself. But I wasn't me. Dr. Lively gave me a reassuring smile, but I could see the glint of something else in his eyes. He already knew this would happen, and he wasn't surprised. The next night, I told myself I wouldn't let it happen again. I wouldn't let myself slip back into that place. I stayed awake as long as I could, but at some point, exhaustion won. Sleep took me, and the moment my body shut down, I was back in the house. This time, I wasn't alone. The bed beside me was occupied. I could hear someone breathing, slow, even, like they'd been there the whole time. I turned my head slowly. The man next to me was asleep. His face turned away. I didn't recognize him. His breathing hitched. His head shifted toward me. I stopped breathing. His face was wrong, too smooth, like a mannequin. His lips twitched. I scrambled out of the bed, my heart pounding. I turned to run, but the mirror caught my eye. My reflection wasn't wearing the same thing I was. I was still in the nightgown, but the woman in the mirror had changed. She looked like me, but she wasn't me. She was smiling. I wasn't. Her head tilted, as if she could see me. Then she spoke. "Why do you keep coming back?" I jolted awake, gasping, sweating, terrified. Dr. Lively and 2 researchers were already in my room, watching me. They weren't shocked, weren't confused, just waiting. I sat up, my breath ragged. What the hell is happening to me? Dr. Lively jotted down more notes. "The memories are forming faster than we anticipated." I froze. What did you just say? Dr. Lively glanced at the researchers before looking back at me. Your dreams, he said. They're not actually dreams. They're memories. I felt ice crawl up my spine. Whose memories? Dr. Lively didn't answer. He just looked at me with calm, clinical detachment. And in that moment, I knew they already knew what was happening to me. And they weren't trying to stop it. They were trying to see how far it would go. I didn't leave my room the next day. Not that I had much of a choice. The door wasn't locked. But whenever I opened it, I found a researcher standing just outside, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp. They were watching me, observing, waiting. I spent the entire morning pacing my small space, replaying Dr. Lively's words in my head. Your dreams, they're not actually dreams. They're memories. Memories of who? Memories of what? I wasn't just dreaming of that house. I was living in it. The fabric of the nightgown felt real. The creak of the old wooden floors felt real. And when the woman in the mirror spoke, I could feel her breath against my skin. I wasn't sure if I had woken up at all. I refused to sleep that night. I stayed upright in bed, fighting exhaustion. My eyes locked on the blinking red monitoring light in the ceiling. The facility was dead silent after dark. No footsteps, no murmured conversations, no sounds of movement at all. It was unnatural, like I was the only living thing in the building, or like something else was awake when everyone else was gone, watching me, waiting. At some point my body gave out. I didn't mean to fall asleep, didn't want to, but the moment my eyelids drooped, I was back. The house was wrong this time, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it felt like it was waiting for me, like it had been expecting me. The air was thick with something I couldn't name. I walked into the hallway. The old floral wallpaper peeled at the edges. The floorboards groaned under my weight. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft, feminine, coming from the end of the hall. I followed the sound, my heart hammering in my chest. The walls seemed closer than before, the ceiling lower, like the house was shrinking around me, like it was trying to trap me inside of it. I reached the bedroom door, placed my hand on the knob. The whisper stopped, the silence stretched for a moment, and then I heard it, breathing, deep, slow, coming from inside the room. I turned the handle, the door creaked open, and I saw her, standing in the corner, not in the mirror this time, not a reflection, but her, the woman who looked exactly like me. She tilted her head, watching me with something between curiosity and amusement. You keep coming back. Her voice was softer this time, almost gentle. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The moment stretched too long, and then she stepped forward, and I knew she wasn't a dream. She was real. I backed away fast, nearly tripping over myself. I wasn't in control of this. I wasn't just dreaming about someone else's life. I was inside of it. I was inside of her. Or maybe she was inside of me. I woke up choking on air. Dr. Lively was already there, watching me like he'd been expecting it, like he knew exactly what I'd seen. She's getting stronger, he muttered. I sat up fast, my hands trembling. Who is she? Dr. Lively just smiled. You're making great progress. I grabbed his wrist before he could step away. Progress toward what? His expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something behind his calm exterior, a glint of something darker. You signed the consent forms, he said simply, and then he walked out, leaving me alone. I didn't sleep the next night, didn't even try. Every time I blinked too long, I saw her face behind my eyes. I wasn't dreaming about her. I wasn't seeing memories. She was coming through. The next morning, I demanded to see a copy of the forms I had signed. They handed me a clipboard like it was no big deal. I skimmed the fine print, my pulse hammering. Everything looked normal, standard research jargon, but near the bottom of the page, there was something new, something I didn't remember agreeing to. Participants agree to the cognitive stabilization process in accordance with cross-memory induction protocols. I froze. I had no idea what that meant. But it wasn't a normal sleep study. It wasn't a dream study. It was something else, and they knew I'd figure it out eventually. That night, I did something stupid, something reckless. I let myself fall asleep on purpose, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see her again. I needed to ask her what was happening to me. When I woke up in the other place, she was already waiting for me, sitting at the dresser, brushing her long, dark hair, like she'd been expecting me. "You're getting closer," she said. I swallowed hard. To what? She didn't answer. She just turned her head toward me. And that's when I saw it, the mirror behind her. I wasn't in it. She was sitting at the dresser, brushing her hair, but the mirror only reflected the empty room behind her. It wasn't my reflection. It wasn't her reflection. It wasn't her reflection. It was nothing. And that's when I realized the dreams weren't just changing me. They were taking me away, piece by piece. And one day, I wouldn't wake up at all. I didn't wake up the way I expected. Not in the sterile white walls of the sleep study facility. Not in my small room with its blinking red monitoring light. When my eyes opened, I was still in the house. But something was wrong. The bed I was in felt too real. The sheets rough, the air thick with a scent of old wood and dust. I sat up slowly, my breath tight in my chest. I wasn't waking up from a dream. I was waking up inside of one. Or worse, I wasn't waking up at all. A creak sounded from the hallway. I stiffened, the sound of bare feet on hardwood. Slow, deliberate steps. I threw the blankets aside and stood up, my legs shaky. The door handle twisted. I held my breath, heart hammering, and then she walked in. Not the scientists, not Dr. Lively. Her, the woman who looked like me. Except now, she didn't just look like me. She was me. Same face, same hair, same eyes, except her expression wasn't mine. She looked at me like I was an intruder in my own body. Like I didn't belong here. She closed the door gently behind her. "You've been here too long." My pulse stuttered. "What do you mean?" She stepped forward, closing the distance between us. Her movements were wrong, not unnatural, just too perfect. Like she had practiced them, like she had been waiting to wear them. "You were supposed to wake up already." She cocked her head. "But they're keeping you here." Something in my stomach twisted. I shook my head. "No, they're just monitoring me. They don't want you to leave," she whispered. I froze. The words hit something deep inside me, something I didn't want to admit, because a part of me already knew it was true. This wasn't a sleep study. This wasn't about dreams. This was about something else. I backed away, keeping my eyes on her. "Who are you?" Her lips twitched into a smile. "You already know." A cold chill crawled down my spine, because deep down I did. I understood what had been happening, what the facility had been doing to me. I had been waking up in someone else's body, someone else's mind. And the longer I stayed, the harder it was to leave, the harder it was to remember who I actually was. And soon, I wasn't going to wake up at all. I turned toward the door, heart racing. I needed to wake up. I needed to get out of here. But when I grabbed the handle, she grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were ice cold. I jerked away, panic rising. "Let me go." Her grip tightened. I tried to pull away, but it was like my own strength was failing me, like my body was losing its grip on reality. "They're trying to replace you," she murmured. Her voice was too soft, too calm. "They needed a vessel, a mind to transfer into something else, and they found you." The blood drained from my face. "That's not true, isn't it?" she whispered. She lifted her hand, and for the first time, I saw her reflection in the mirror behind her. Not the one I expected, not me. Something else, something wrong. And suddenly, I felt it. A pull, a deep, aching tug in the center of my chest, like something was trying to pull me out of my own body. I gasped, grabbing at my throat, and the world tilted. I woke up screaming. Dr. Lively and 2 other researchers were already standing over me, like they had been waiting for it, like they knew exactly when I would wake up. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the headboard. "Get away from me." Dr. Lively scribbled something down on his clipboard. "Tell us what you saw." I shook my head. "No, I'm done. I'm leaving." Dr. Lively sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "That's not an option." My chest tightened. "What do you mean it's not an option?" He glanced at the researchers beside him. They stepped closer, like they were preparing for something, like they were expecting me to fight. "You're not finished yet." I shoved off the bed, but my legs were weak, like I had been asleep for weeks, not days, like my body wasn't fully mine anymore. Dr. Lively just watched, calm, unconcerned. "You need to go back," he said. "She's not done with you yet." I froze, because I knew exactly who he meant. The woman in the mirror. The one who wasn't me. The one who had been waiting for me all along. I thought I had been dreaming of her. I thought she was some ghost trapped in a memory. But I was wrong. I was never dreaming of her. I was dreaming for her, and the facility had been helping her find a way through. Dr. Lively smiled. "Get some rest," he said, his voice gentle. "We'll be monitoring closely tonight." He turned and walked toward the door, the researchers right behind him, and as they left, I felt it again, that same pull in my chest, like something was reaching for me, like something was waiting, and this time, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to fight it. I didn't move for a long time. After they left, I sat there in bed, staring at the door, my heart pounding so hard, it felt like it was rattling my ribs. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of this place, but something deep inside me whispered that it was already too late. The pull in my chest was getting stronger, like an invisible thread was tugging me back into the dream world, back to that house, back to her. And the worst part, I could feel something else now, something I hadn't noticed before. The presence wasn't just pulling me in my sleep anymore. It was still here, in the waking world, watching, waiting. I needed a plan. I forced myself to breathe, to think. The facility wasn't locked down. They had rules, procedures. People weren't supposed to know what was actually happening here. That meant if I walked out right now, they wouldn't risk tackling me in the hall. They'd try to calm me down first, try to talk me into staying willingly. That was my only chance. I moved slowly, testing my legs. They felt weak, like I'd been bedridden for weeks instead of days. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to stand. The world tilted for a second, but I caught myself against the bed. My breaths were shallow. The room felt too small, too tight, the walls pressing in on me. I moved to the door and twisted the handle. Unlocked. I cracked it open. The hallway outside was empty. Just white walls, a row of closed doors, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. I stepped out, moving fast, bare feet silent on the tile floor. I turned toward the exit, toward the hallway I knew led back to the reception area. I had almost made it past the first corner when I heard a voice behind me, going somewhere. I spun, my stomach dropping. A woman stood in the hallway, just outside one of the other rooms. She was wearing a hospital gown like mine, barefoot, hair messy, her eyes hollow. Her skin was pale, almost too pale, like she had been drained of something important. I felt that same pull in my chest again, but now it was stronger, almost magnetic, like a part of me wanted to step toward her, wanted to listen to her. "You don't belong here," she murmured. Her voice was softer than I expected, almost hesitant. "You need to leave before." She stiffened, her head jerked to the side, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she shook her head, her lips twitched, and when she turned her gaze back to me, her eyes weren't hollow anymore. They were full of something dark, something wrong. "Never mind." Her voice changed. It was deeper now, just slightly. She smiled. "You should stay." The air around me felt different, heavier. The hallway seemed longer, stretching away in both directions, warping at the edges, like the whole place was shifting, like I was already slipping, like I was already leaving. I ran. I don't even remember making the decision. I just turned and bolted down the hall, lungs burning, legs screaming in protest. I heard her laughter behind me, soft, amused, like she knew exactly how this was going to end, like she'd seen it before. I turned the last corner and slammed into Dr. Lively. He caught my arms before I could stumble backward. "Whoa there," he said smoothly, like I was just having a bad night, like nothing was wrong. But I could see the glint in his cold, clinical eyes. I could see the smugness hiding beneath his expression, like he had been waiting for me to break. "You need to go back to your room," My breath hitched. I want to leave. Dr. Lively smiled. Of course you do. But that's not possible anymore. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? He tilted his head. You've been slipping too long. Your mind is already halfway through the threshold. He leaned in, voice soft. If you leave now, you won't exist in either place. I shook my head. That's not true, isn't it? I opened my mouth to argue. And then I felt it. The pull in my chest twisted into something worse. Like a hook had been lodged behind my ribs. Like something was yanking me backward. My vision blurred. The hallway flickered. And then, just for a split second, I saw it. The other side. The house. The wooden floor beneath my feet. The mirror in the corner. And her, standing in front of it, smiling. She lifted a hand and pressed her palm flat against the glass. And then, I wasn't in the facility anymore. I gasped, stumbling back. The air smelled like old wood and dust. Like her. Like the dream. No, no, no. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be awake. I turned and froze. The mirror was still in the room, but I wasn't in it. I was gone. The reflection only showed her, standing there, wearing my face, except she wasn't looking back at me anymore. She was looking at something behind me. I turned slowly, and my breath caught. A bed. A small, simple bed with white sheets, and a figure lying in it. A woman, motionless, breathing shallow, eyes closed. Me. I was watching myself sleep, and when I reached out, my fingers went straight through the bed frame, straight through everything. I wasn't just in the dream anymore. I was stuck inside of it, and she was the one who had woken up instead. I was trapped. The realization sank in like a cold stone in my gut. I wasn't in the facility anymore. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was in hers, or she was in mine. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, heavy, like I was inhaling something that wasn't quite air. The house around me was still, but not in a peaceful way. It was too still, like something was holding its breath, waiting, watching. I turned back to the mirror, my stomach twisting. She was still there, still wearing my face, still smiling. But she wasn't standing in the dream anymore. She was awake. She was in the facility. She was in my life. And I was here, stuck alone. I whirled around, my pulse hammering. Let me out. The woman in the mirror just tilted her head, amused, calm, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You don't understand yet, she murmured. Her voice was softer than I expected, almost gentle. You were always supposed to be here. My chest tightened. That's not true. She didn't argue. She just stepped closer to the mirror, so close that if I reached out, I could almost touch the glass. They were never studying you, she said. They were preparing you. I shook my head. No, no, that wasn't true. I had signed up for a sleep study, a lucid dreaming trial. Not this, not whatever this was. I pressed my palms against the wooden dresser, trying to steady myself. The room around me was warping, stretching at the edges, like the world itself was unstable. I don't belong here, I whispered. The woman in the mirror just smiled. You do now. I felt it then, something shifting inside of me, like my mind wasn't settling properly in this space, like it was still fighting to wake up. You took my place, I hissed. Her smile faltered, for just a second, and in that second, I saw it. The truth. She wasn't in control yet. She had woken up in my body, but she wasn't fully settled. She still needed time, and that meant I still had a chance. I lunged at the mirror, not to break it, to pull her back, to force myself through. But the second my hands hit the glass, it was like falling into cold water. The air rushed out of my lungs, darkness swallowed everything, and suddenly, I wasn't in the house anymore. I was in a bedroom I didn't recognize. Not the facility, not the house, somewhere else, somewhere worse. The bed was small, covered in thin white sheets. The air smelled damp, stale. A single window let in a sliver of moonlight. But outside, there was nothing. No buildings, no streetlights, no trees, just black, like the world outside the window had never existed at all. I turned slowly, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. The mirror was still there, same as before. But now there were dozens of them, lining the walls, stacked against the furniture, all reflecting different versions of me, some asleep, some awake, some staring at me with wide, glassy eyes. But one of them was moving. She stepped forward from one of the mirrors. Not my reflection, not a trick of the light, but her, the woman who had taken my body. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked angry. "You weren't supposed to fight this," she said. Her voice was sharper now. Not gentle, not calm, demanding. "You were supposed to let go." I took a step back, my breath shaky. "Give it back," I whispered. Her expression didn't change. "I can't." My stomach twisted. "You mean you won't?" She tilted her head. "No, I mean I can't." She stepped closer, and I saw something horrifying. Her face was changing, shifting, like her skin was trying to decide who she was. For a split second, she wasn't me anymore. She was someone else. Someone with dark, sunken eyes, with a mouth that was too wide. And when she spoke again, her voice wasn't human at all. "You should have never come here." And then, she lunged. I woke up screaming. Bright lights, a beeping monitor, the scent of antiseptic filled my nose. I was back in the facility, but something was wrong. I could feel it. Something was different. I sat up slowly, my head spinning. The room was empty. No doctors, no researchers, just the steady beep of the heart monitor beside me. My hands shook as I reached for my reflection in the small mirror above the sink. And the second I saw my own face, I froze, because it wasn't my face anymore. It was hers. I couldn't breathe. I sat there, staring at the mirror above the sink, my fingers tightening around the edge of the mattress. The reflection staring back at me wasn't mine. It was her, but it was still me. Or rather, I was still in here, still trapped, still watching through someone else's skin. I reached up, hands shaking, and ran my fingers along my face. The bones beneath felt different, the structure off, like someone had taken my features and stretched them just enough to be wrong. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear at the skin, rip it away and find my real face underneath. But I knew that wasn't how this worked. That wasn't how any of this worked. I had lost my body, and now this one belonged to me. Whether I wanted it or not, I forced myself to breathe, steadying the tremor in my hands. I had to think. I had to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't fix this. Panicking wouldn't get me back. I turned away from the mirror, forcing my gaze toward the door. The facility was silent, too silent, like the walls themselves were listening, waiting. I swung my legs over the bed, my muscles aching as I stood. The world lurched, but I steadied myself against the nightstand. I needed to get out. I needed to find Dr. Lively, find someone who could undo this. But a voice in the back of my head whispered, "You think they didn't plan this? You think this wasn't the goal all along?" I swallowed hard. No, I wasn't going to accept that. I wasn't going to let this be real. I moved toward the door, slowly twisting the handle. Unlocked. I stepped out into the hallway and immediately froze. The corridor wasn't right. Not anymore. The lights above me buzzed and flickered, casting long, stretching shadows along the floor. The doors to the other rooms were open, swinging slightly like someone had passed through them just moments ago. And the air smelled wrong, like old dust, like something rotting. I stepped forward, bare feet silent on the tile. The further I walked, the more the hallway seemed to change. The walls weren't smooth anymore. They were warped, bending inward slightly, like they were breathing, like the whole place was alive. I kept moving, heart hammering. At the end of the corridor, the door leading to the reception area stood slightly ajar. I reached for it, fingers trembling, and then I heard it. A voice, soft, familiar. "You're going the wrong way." I spun around, my stomach twisting. At first I didn't see anything, just the empty, flickering hallway. Then, a shape moved in one of the open doorways. A shadow. It stepped forward slowly, emerging into the dim light, and my heart stopped. It was me. Not the face I wore now. Not the stretched, stolen version. But me. The real me. The version I had lost. She stood there, head slightly tilted, watching me with unblinking eyes. Her expression was calm. Too calm. "It's not going to work," she whispered. I took a step back. What do you mean?" She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me with that too familiar face. "You're stuck here now," she murmured. "The body you're trying to get back to." She tilted her head. "It's already occupied." I felt the words like a punch to the stomach. I shook my head. No, that's not true." She just smiled. "It is." She stepped closer. Slow, deliberate. "They're watching, you know." My breath hitched. "Who?" She didn't answer. She just lifted a hand and pointed. I turned, and my blood turned to ice. The mirrors. The hallway was lined with them now. Mirrors where the doors had been. Mirrors that stretched the entire length of the corridor. And inside them, I saw faces staring back at me. Hundreds of them. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. Some had missing eyes, missing mouths, twisted features. But all of them had one thing in common. They were watching. Their gazes locked onto me, unmoving, unblinking, like they had been waiting for me. I took a step back, my throat dry. "What is this?" I whispered. "You already know." My reflection whispered back. And then, the mirrors shattered. The sound was deafening. Glass exploded outward, shards flying through the air like razor-sharp confetti. I raised my arms, shielding my face, but nothing hit me. Nothing even touched me. And when I looked again, the mirrors were whole, unbroken, and all the reflections, all the watching eyes, were gone. I stood there, breathing hard. The air was still again. The hallway normal. The facility silent, like none of it had ever happened. Like I had imagined the entire thing. But I knew I hadn't. I could still feel something shifting in the walls. Still feel something inside of me. Moving, growing, like this body, this new face, wasn't just mine anymore. It was becoming something else, something I wasn't sure I could control. And when I turned back to the mirror, the reflection that stared back at me was smiling. But I wasn't. I didn't smile, but my reflection did. It was slow, too slow, like a ripple crawling across the surface of a still lake. The smile stretched wider, wider, until it was too much. A grin that didn't belong to me. A face I was wearing but didn't own. I took a step back, heart hammering. My reflection didn't move. It just watched. And then, in the silence of that too empty hallway, it did something worse. It spoke. "How does it feel?" My stomach clenched. "How does what feel?" I whispered. The reflection's eyes darkened. To be someone else. I turned away from the mirror, chest tight. I had to get out. I had to keep moving. I started toward the end of the hallway, toward the door leading out of this place. Every step felt like walking through something heavy, like the air itself was thickening around me. The walls seemed closer. The lights flickered above, humming in long drawn-out pulses. I reached the door and grabbed the handle. Cold, too cold. I twisted it, and it wouldn't budge. "You really think that's going to work?" The voice was right behind me. Too close, too real. I spun, and she was there. Not in the mirror this time, not behind the glass. She was standing in the hallway with me now. The other me. The real me. Or at least, the one I had been before. She tilted her head. "You still don't get it, do you?" I swallowed. "Get what?" The lights above us buzzed louder. The air smelled strange, like burning paper. "You didn't steal her face." She took a step closer. "She stole yours." I shook my head. No, that's not true. But my voice wavered, because deep inside I knew something wasn't right. Something had never been right. Since the moment I'd signed up for this, since the moment they'd put me under. The dreams weren't dreams. They were extractions. They weren't studying me. They were taking me apart. I looked down at my hands and froze. The fingers weren't mine. Not anymore. They were changing, shifting beneath the skin, like they weren't sure who they belonged to, like the body was fighting itself. I staggered back, pressing against the door. "This isn't happening," I whispered. The other me just watched. Then she did something that made every hair on my body stand up. She lifted her hand, and reached for her own face. I didn't want to watch. I wanted to close my eyes and pretend this wasn't real. But I couldn't. I couldn't look away. Her fingers dug into her cheek, sank in too deep. The skin stretched, split, and then she started peeling it away. I screamed. Or maybe I just thought I did, because my throat felt tight, like the sound had been stolen from me. She kept pulling. The skin unfurled in thin, wet layers, like paper curling in fire, like she was removing a mask. Underneath, there was nothing, no face, no skin, just an empty void, dark, deep, like staring into the mouth of something endless. And then, it smiled. I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. The hallway stretched ahead of me, longer than it should have been. The walls shifted as I moved, twisting like they were alive. I sprinted past empty doors, past mirrors that no longer showed reflections. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could hear her behind me, the soft, wet sound of footsteps that weren't feet anymore. She wasn't chasing me, not in the way a person would. She was following, like a shadow that would always be there. Like she didn't need to rush, because she knew I wouldn't get far. I reached a stairwell at the end of the corridor. I lunged through the door, slamming it shut behind me. The air was thicker here, the walls darker. The stairs spiraled downward, disappearing into a black abyss. I had two choices: go back, or keep going. I chose down. Each step felt wrong beneath my feet, like the stairs were never meant to be used, like I was walking deeper into something I shouldn't be in. The air grew colder, the silence grew heavier, and then, the whispering started, soft at first, like wind through dead trees, then louder, voices, familiar ones, my own voice among them, and they were all saying the same thing: wake up, wake up, wake up. I stumbled. The whispering was inside my head now, inside my bones, inside my skin. That wasn't mine anymore. I clutched my ears, but it didn't stop. It only got louder. Wake up, wake up, wake up. And then the stairs ended. A door, massive, black, no handle, no keyhole, just a surface that pulsed like it was breathing. I reached out, my fingers brushed the wood, and it shuddered. The whispering stopped, the air went still, and then the door swung open on its own. I stepped inside, and the world collapsed around me. The world collapsed, but I didn't fall. I should have been plunging into nothingness, into the abyss beyond the door. But instead, I floated, suspended in the dark, like I was underwater, except I could still breathe, except I didn't need to. I didn't feel weightless though. I felt held, like something was keeping me here, like something was waiting. And then, in the silence, a voice spoke, a voice I knew. You took too long. I turned, twisting in the darkness. There was no light, no walls, no sense of up or down, but I could still see, or maybe I was just perceiving. Because she was here, she was with me, the other me, the one who had stolen my body, or the one I had lost it to. She was watching, not smiling, not moving, just watching. You were supposed to let go. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't mocking. It was disappointed, like I had broken a rule I didn't even know existed. But you didn't. I felt my throat tighten. I want my body back. She tilted her head, not slowly, not naturally, like the motion wasn't hers, like she was wearing it. You still think it belongs to you. I stared, because what else could I do? I had lost control. I had lost my body. I had lost my name. And now, she was telling me I had lost the right to it, too. You don't get it. She stepped closer, and the dark shuddered around her. That body was never yours to begin with. The words knocked the air out of me. I shook my head. No. She nodded. Yes. And then, the dark changed. It wasn't nothingness anymore. It was memories, fragments of dreams that weren't mine. Or maybe they had been for a time. I saw myself, but not as me. I saw a girl signing a form in an empty waiting room. A girl lying on a sterile white bed. A girl drifting off as electrodes hummed on her skin. But then, the images warped, and I saw another girl, in another bed. Her face was too blurry to see, her body too faint to recognize, but she was there, waiting, and as soon as I had fallen asleep, she had stepped into me. She had taken the body I thought was mine, and she had woken up in my life, because I had never really had one of my own, because I had never really been me. My head spun. That's not true. It is. The dark throbbed, a heartbeat inside something massive. Your life was borrowed. Your face was borrowed. You were nothing but a placeholder. I felt sick. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight. But what was the point? How do you fight something that already owns you? How do you run from something when you don't even have legs anymore? Then why do I remember it? I whispered. Why do I feel like it was real? The other me hesitated, just for a moment, and then she spoke softly. Because it was, for a time, but now it belongs to me. I felt it then. The pull, the drag of something deeper, like my mind was being reeled back into the void, like I was being put away, forgotten, erased, and I knew, if I didn't stop it now, I never would. I would disappear, for good. I clenched my fists. No, no, I wasn't going down like this. I wasn't going to let her win. I lunged forward, grabbing her by the wrist. Her eyes widened, surprised, not because I had moved, but because she could feel me, because I was real enough to touch. This isn't over. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't let her. I pulled, and suddenly, the dark shattered. The world snapped back. My chest heaved as I sat up, gasping for air. Fluorescent lights, a hospital bed, a heart monitor beeping beside me. I was back. I was awake. And this time, I wasn't alone. Dr. Lively stood at the foot of the bed, watching, smiling. Welcome back. Her voice was too calm, too pleased. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. What happened? I rasped. Dr. Lively didn't blink. We weren't sure if you would make it, she said. Most don't. I felt a cold weight settle over my chest. Most. Her smile didn't fade. You weren't the first. You won't be the last. I gripped the edge of the bed, my fingers aching. Where is she? Dr. Lively tilted her head. Who? I felt the words like a slap. The other me. Her smile grew. There is no other you. The words chilled me, because I knew she was lying. I knew I had seen her. I knew she was still out there. But something was different now. Something had shifted, because when I looked into the mirror across the room, the reflection wasn't smiling anymore. And it wasn't me. The reflection wasn't smiling. And it wasn't me. My chest clenched. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The face in the mirror, the one that should have been mine, wasn't. It was watching me, not with fear, not with confusion, but with understanding, like it knew, like it had been waiting for me to notice. Behind me, Dr. Lively's voice was too calm. You should rest. But I couldn't. Not now. Not when I saw what was in the mirror. Not when I realized I wasn't alone in here. I turned, my hands gripping the sheets beneath me. Where is she? I whispered again. Dr. Lively didn't react. She just watched, like she was studying me, like I was some kind of experiment still in progress. There is no her, she said softly. There is only you. I didn't believe her. I couldn't, because I knew. I felt it. Something inside me was wrong. Something inside me wasn't mine. I wasn't alone in my own head. My fingers trembled as I lifted them to my temples. My skin felt hot, like something was pushing against it from the inside, like something was trying to break through. I need to get out of here. My voice shook. Dr. Lively's smile didn't fade. You already are. Her words sat wrong in my ears, like they weren't for me, like they were for someone else. I swallowed, forcing myself to sit up. The room spun. The edges of my vision blurred. I felt like I was still somewhere else, still half inside the void, still half trapped in a place I wasn't meant to escape from. And that's when I realized it. I had pulled myself back, but I hadn't pulled back alone. A wave of nausea hit me. I stumbled out of the bed, my legs barely holding my weight. The hospital gown clung to my skin, damp with sweat. Dr. Lively took a step forward. You should lie down. No, I snapped. I backed away, breathing too fast. The air in the room felt heavier, like it was watching me too, like it was waiting for me to realize the truth. And then, I did. I felt it. Something inside me shifted. Something pressed against my ribs from the inside. I gasped, and I heard it, a voice whispering from within my own skull. We never left. I choked on my own breath. I slammed my hands against my head. No, you're not real. But the whispering continued, soft, patient. You never left the dream. Either. I squeezed my eyes shut, tried to drown it out, tried to push it back down. But I couldn't, because it wasn't just in my head anymore. It was part of me. It had come back with me, and it wasn't leaving. Dr. Lively's voice broke through the static. You should sit down. I jerked away from her. No, no, I need to leave. She didn't stop me, didn't try to restrain me. She just smiled, like she had seen this before, like she had expected this all along. I stumbled toward the door. My hands shook as I gripped the handle, twisted, pulled. It opened, and that was the worst part. It shouldn't have. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The walls were too white, too sterile. It felt wrong, like I wasn't in a hospital, like I was somewhere else, somewhere meant to keep people in. I turned left, started walking, one foot in front of the other. The whispering followed me. You think you escaped, but you never woke up. My stomach clenched. I ignored it, kept moving, but my reflection didn't. There were mirrors on the walls now, rows of them, lining the entire corridor, each one reflecting a different version of me. Some were older, some were younger, some had missing eyes, some had no mouths, but they were all watching, all of them following my movements, except for one that wasn't, one that was standing still, even when I kept moving, one that was just smiling. I stopped, turned, looked directly into it. The me in the mirror didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared back. And then, you never left. The words weren't mine, but they came from my own mouth. I staggered back, and my reflection stepped forward. One step, then another, until it wasn't just in the mirror anymore. Until it was right in front of me. And then, with slow, deliberate precision, it reached out and touched my face. The world broke apart, shattered like glass. The mirrors exploded inward, but instead of shards, they were pieces of memory, pieces of me. And in that moment, I knew. I had never really woken up. I had never escaped. I had only gone deeper. And now, I wasn't coming back. Not this time. Not ever. The mirrors exploded inward, but instead of shards, they were pieces of memory, fragments of a life I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. Flashes of things I had seen, but never lived. A childhood home, but not mine. A birthday party, but the faces were blurred. Hands gripping mine in the dark, but I didn't know whose hands they were. I was splintering, tearing apart at the seams, and my reflection, or what I had thought was my reflection, was standing right in front of me, its hands still pressing against my face. You never left. It wasn't speaking aloud. The words crawled through my skin. They hummed in my bones, like they were being woven into me, like they were becoming part of me. I tried to pull away. I tried to wake up, but I couldn't, because this time, I wasn't dreaming. This time, I was being erased. The hallway stretched. The lights flickered. The air felt thick, too thick, like I was breathing in something alive, like I was being pulled under. I forced my arms up, trying to shove the thing in front of me away, but my hands went through it, like it wasn't solid anymore, like it was just a ripple in the air. And then, it laughed, low, cold, like a sound pulled from deep inside my own throat. You're not real anymore. I staggered back. My legs felt wrong, like they weren't mine, like they were forgetting how to hold me. The mirrors around me kept shifting, kept changing, and in every single one, I saw different versions of myself, not just from different ages, not just from different moments. I saw different lives, me, but not me, somewhere else, someone else. And in every reflection, I was looking right at myself, all of them, hundreds, thousands, all of them whispering the same thing. Wake up, wake up, wake up. But I was awake, wasn't I? Or was that just another layer of the dream? Another trap inside a trap. I pressed my hands to my face, tried to focus, tried to hold on to something real, but my skin felt wrong, too smooth, too new, like it had been rewritten, like I had been put into a body that wasn't quite finished yet. The whispering grew louder, the lights buzzed, pulsing in a slow rhythm, a heartbeat, a timer, something counting down. And then, I heard the voice again, not from the mirrors, not from my reflection, from behind me. You took too long. I turned. Dr. Lively was standing there, just watching, not smiling, not pleased, just waiting. You were supposed to let go. My stomach clenched. What do you mean? She stepped forward, and I felt the air shift, like the walls were breathing in, like the room itself was responding to her presence. You never left the experiment. Her voice was calm, too calm. You just moved deeper into it. I shook my head. No, no, that's not right. I woke up. I left the facility. Dr. Lively just tilted her head, like she had heard this 100 times before. If you left, why are you still here? The words froze me, because I didn't have an answer, because I didn't know anymore. I stumbled back. My breath came too fast. The lights dimmed. The mirrors shifted. I felt the world closing in, like a door shutting behind me, like I was losing myself all over again. I gritted my teeth. Then how do I wake up? Dr. Lively sighed. You don't. The words hit me like ice water, like something heavy, sinking into my chest. That's not true. I whispered. Dr. Lively just watched me, unblinking, unmoving. You're already awake, she said. This is your life now. My stomach twisted. I looked down at my hands, tried to focus, tried to hold on to something real, but the whispering was still there. Wake up, wake up, wake up. But I couldn't, because I was already awake, because this was it, because I had been pulled too deep, and now there was no going back. The mirrors flickered, the reflections faded, and one by one, they disappeared, until only one was left. And in that final reflection, staring back at me, wasn't me at all. The last reflection wasn't me, but it was wearing my face. It stood there, motionless, staring through the glass. It didn't breathe, didn't blink, just watched, like it had been waiting for this moment, like it had been waiting for me. Who are you? The words came out weak, like they weren't even mine anymore. The reflection tilted its head, and then, it smiled. Not in a friendly way, not like it was happy to see me, like it was finally taking its place, like it had been waiting for me to figure it out. And then in the silence, it spoke. You took too long. I staggered back. My body felt wrong, lighter, less real, like I was slipping, like I was melting into the air. No, I whispered. The reflection stepped forward, and I swore I felt the floor shift beneath me, like the room was tilting in its direction, like it was gravitating toward it, like I was. You were never meant to come back. The voice was mine, but it wasn't coming from my mouth. It was coming from the mirror. The thing in the mirror, the thing that wasn't me, but had my face, had my voice, had my memories, and it was ready to take my place. I turned to Dr. Lively. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look concerned. She just sighed. It's always like this. Her tone was tired, like she had seen this play out before, like she had heard these same words from 100 others before me. You're just making it harder on yourself. I shook my head. This isn't real. Dr. Lively arched a brow. Define real. The words sent a cold shudder down my spine. Because I couldn't. Not anymore. Not when the walls shimmered like a dream. Not when the air felt thicker than it should. Not when my own body didn't feel like my own anymore. I need to leave. Dr. Lively just smiled. Go ahead. The words made me freeze. Because they weren't a warning. They weren't a threat. They were a test. Like she was curious to see if I could even do it. I turned to the door. It was open. No locks, no barriers, just a hallway beyond it, stretching into the distance, but something felt wrong. Like I had already tried this before, like I had already walked down that hall, like I had already failed. I stepped forward. My hands trembled. I didn't look back. I just kept moving. One step, then another. The hallway felt endless. I kept waiting for it to change, kept waiting for a door, a window, something, but there was nothing. Just more white walls, more buzzing lights, more of the same. And then I saw the mirror. The same mirror I had just walked away from, but it was in front of me again, waiting, watching, like I had never moved at all. You can't leave. The words weren't mine. They came from inside the mirror. The other me, the one that had taken my body, the one that had been waiting for me to realize, this is where you belong now. I gritted my teeth. No, it just smiled, and this time, it stepped forward, and out of the glass. I didn't have time to react. 1 second, it was just a reflection. The next, it was real. It was standing in front of me. I could feel it. The air around it was colder, thicker, like something had crossed a barrier. It never should have. It reached out, grabbed my wrist, and I felt it. It wasn't just touching me. It was pulling something out of me, something I couldn't afford to lose. I tried to fight, tried to pull away, but my strength was fading, like my body was unraveling, like I was being drained, like I was becoming the reflection. It's my turn now. The words were soft, patient, like it wasn't in a hurry, like it knew this was inevitable, like I had been fighting for nothing. I gritted my teeth, fought to stay solid, to stay here, to stay me, but the mirror rippled behind it, and I knew I was going to fade. I was going to disappear, and no one would even know, because there would still be a version of me walking around, because no one would question it, because this had always been the plan, and I had never stood a chance. No, I forced the word out. The reflection paused, and in that single hesitation, I acted. I reached out, grabbed it by the arm, and pulled. The room shuddered, the lights flickered, and suddenly, I wasn't the one being erased anymore. It was. The reflection struggled, its face contorted, like it had never expected me to fight back, like it had never lost before. I pulled harder, forced it back toward the mirror. It screamed, a sound that wasn't human, that wasn't mine. And then, it broke apart, like smoke, like dust, like a dream that had been cut short. The room was silent again. The mirror was empty. No reflections, no other versions of me. Just glass, just nothing. Dr. Lively sighed. You always fight so hard. She didn't sound angry, just tired, like she had seen this before, like she had seen people like me try to escape, like she knew it wasn't over. Not really, not yet, not ever. And as I stood there, chest heaving, body shaking, I saw it. The first flicker, the first glitch. The mirror rippled again, and something inside me whispered, it's not over. The mirror rippled again, not like glass, not like something solid, but like the surface of water, like a doorway not quite shut. I staggered back, my breath ragged. Dr. Lively still stood there, watching, not stopping me, not helping me, just waiting, like she had seen this all before, like she knew what would happen next. And I think deep down so did I. It's not over. The whisper came from the mirror, or maybe from inside me. I didn't know anymore, because everything was wrong, because I could still feel it. The weight of something else inside my skin, like I wasn't alone, like it had never really left. I turned to Dr. Lively. What did you do to me? Her face didn't change. We gave you what you asked for. I stared. A chill ran through me. I didn't ask for this. She just tilted her head. Didn't you? And then, before I could answer, the room shifted. The walls blurred. The ceiling warped. The air grew thicker, like the dream was collapsing, like the world around me wasn't stable anymore. I tried to move, tried to run, but my body felt heavy, like it was being held in place, like something didn't want me to leave. And then, a hand touched my shoulder. I froze, because I knew no one else was in the room. I turned my head slowly, and there it was, the reflection, standing outside the mirror. Behind me, it didn't look angry, didn't look afraid. It just smiled, like it had won, like I had never stood a chance. "You don't belong here." Its voice was wrong, like it was too deep, like it was too old, like it had been waiting for this moment, longer than I had been alive. I tried to step away, but I couldn't, because its fingers dug in, because it was holding me in place, because it was real. Dr. Lively sighed. "You're resisting too much." Her voice was calm, too calm, like this was routine, like she had seen this before. "It's easier if you let it happen." I shook my head. "No." Her lips pressed together. "Fighting won't change the outcome." But she was wrong, because I had already fought before, and I was still here. I was still me. I just had to keep it that way. I ripped myself free. The reflection stumbled back, not surprised, not afraid, just waiting, like it knew I couldn't run forever, like it knew what I hadn't figured out yet. And then the whispering came back, not from it, not from the mirror, from everywhere, from inside the walls, from inside my own skin. "You don't belong here. You don't belong here. You don't belong here." I clenched my jaw, fought to stay grounded, fought to stay me. But the world was coming apart, and I was coming apart with it. Dr. Lively didn't move, didn't help, didn't even flinch. She just watched, like I was just another part of the test. "You're making it worse." Her voice barely reached me. The air was humming, vibrating, like reality was unraveling, like I was about to be swallowed whole. Let go. But I couldn't, because I wasn't ready, because I wasn't done fighting, because this wasn't the end. Not yet. I staggered forward, past the reflection, past Dr. Lively, toward the only thing left, the mirror, still rippling, still waiting. I didn't know why, didn't know if it would help me, didn't know if it would make things worse, but I knew one thing: I couldn't stay here. Not like this, not when I could feel myself fading. I took a deep breath, and I stepped into the glass. The world shattered, the air ripped away, everything went black, and then, I wasn't anywhere at all. The silence was too deep, the darkness was too thick. I wasn't floating, I wasn't falling, I just was, like I had been unmade, like I had been reset. And then, the whisper came one last time. "You finally understand." And I did, because I had never been waking up. I had never been leaving. I had only been moving deeper, and now I wasn't sure if I had ever been real at all. The mirror watched me, or maybe it was just waiting, waiting for me to step closer, waiting for me to slip up. I could feel it, like a heartbeat under glass, like it was breathing in sync with me, like it had been doing so for a long, long time. And maybe I had just never noticed before. The intercom crackled again. "You should get some rest." Dr. Lively's voice was too calm, like she was gently guiding me toward a choice, like she knew I had no other option. I didn't answer, because I knew if I lay down now, I wouldn't wake up, not as myself, not as me. I turned away from the mirror, took slow, careful steps toward the door. I already knew it would be locked, but I had to try. I pressed my palm against the cold metal, pushed, nothing. I pressed harder, still nothing. I could hear something mechanical inside, shifting, like the door was alive, like it was listening, like it was waiting too. "This isn't real." I whispered it under my breath, a useless mantra, a desperate prayer. But the walls didn't dissolve, the ceiling didn't flicker away, the floor didn't turn to mist. Nothing changed, except the mirror. It rippled again, just for a second, just enough to remind me it was still there, still watching, still ready. I closed my eyes, took a shaky breath. I needed a plan. I needed a way out. If I couldn't go through the door, then there was only one other place to go, the one place I had been avoiding. The mirror. "You're not thinking clearly." Dr. Lively's voice slid into the room like smoke. "You should sit down. You need to calm yourself." I ignored her. She wasn't here to help me. She never had been. I stepped toward the mirror. It didn't ripple this time. It held still, like it was waiting for me to make the first move, like it already knew I would. I pressed my palm against the glass. It was cold, but not like a surface, like something deeper. Like touching the glass was touching a frozen lake in winter. Something underneath it was waiting, something hidden beneath the ice. And then, it blinked. Not the mirror, not me. The reflection. It blinked first, and I didn't. I snatched my hand away. My pulse raced. I wanted to turn around, wanted to back away, wanted to pretend I hadn't just seen what I had seen. But it was too late, because the reflection was moving now, and I wasn't. It tilted its head, like it was curious, like it was figuring me out. And then, it smiled. You're ready now. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a statement, a fact, like it had been waiting for me to accept this, like I had been resisting something inevitable. And now, I had finally given in. I'm not ready for anything. My voice was hoarse, raw, like I had been screaming for hours. The reflection just laughed, a soft, almost gentle sound, like I had just told a joke. Then why did you come back? I staggered back, because the words hit me hard, like a fist to the chest, like something I had been refusing to understand. Had I come back? Had I ever left at all? Or had I just been going deeper and deeper this entire time? I tried to think back, tried to remember the last time I had been awake, really awake, and I couldn't. The reflection stepped forward, pressed its own palm against the glass. Only it wasn't glass anymore. The surface melted like water, shimmered, stretched, became a doorway, and I realized it wasn't stepping out. I was being pulled in. I fought, tried to hold my ground, tried to stay on this side, but the floor tilted beneath me, like gravity had shifted, like the whole room was dragging me toward the glass. I felt my feet slide, felt my body tip forward, felt the cold liquid surface press against my skin. And then I was through. The world swallowed me. The air vanished. Everything was black. And for a moment, just a brief, horrible moment, I thought maybe I had just died. Maybe this was what death felt like. But then, I opened my eyes. I was in my bed. The facility was gone. No white walls, no buzzing lights, just my room, the familiar creak of my apartment ceiling, the faint hum of my heater in the corner. I could smell coffee. I could hear the city outside. It was morning. I was home. I was home. I was home. I sat up slowly. My heart pounded. My skin was clammy. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, fumbled to check the time. 8:34 a.m. Sunday. I had missed 3 days. I had been gone for 3 whole days. Or maybe I had never left at all. I sucked in a shaky breath. I had to be sure. I had to know. I swung my legs over the bed, pushed myself to my feet. I stumbled to the bathroom, hands shaking, fingers numb. I needed to see. I needed to know. Yai. I flipped on the light. The mirror was still. No ripples, no movement. Just me, just my own reflection. I exhaled. Maybe it had been a dream. Yai. Maybe I had just imagined everything. Maybe my reflection blinked, but I hadn't. The mirror held still, like it was waiting, like it was deciding what to do with me. I took a step back, a slow, trembling step, but it wasn't enough, because I knew it had followed me home. The bathroom felt too small, the air too thick. I could hear my own breathing, short, uneven, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. I forced myself to look again, to stare into my own reflection, to see if it would move again. It didn't. Not at first, not until I reached for the light switch, and then, it blinked, again, 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 too fast, like it was learning, like it was testing something, and then, it smiled. You're still not awake. The voice was mine, but it wasn't me. It came from inside my head, from inside the mirror, from both at once. My stomach twisted. I gripped the edge of the sink to stay upright, because I knew what it meant. You never left. The words curled around my brain, like a snake coiling tighter, like a whisper I had always known was coming. You just think you did. I shook my head, tried to push it away, tried to deny it. No, but I couldn't finish the sentence, because I didn't know how it ended. because I didn't know if it was true. The reflection tilted its head, studying me, like it was waiting for me to realize it, to understand, to accept. And then the world tilted. The bathroom shifted, everything blurred at the edges. And I felt it, that pull, that gravity, that same force dragging me toward the glass. You never woke up. The words were softer now, almost comforting, like a mother rocking a child to sleep, like a lullaby I had always known. You're still in the facility, still in the chair, still dreaming. You just don't remember anymore. I squeezed my eyes shut, shook my head violently. No, I got out. I remember waking up. I remember coming home. But the words felt hollow, because I couldn't remember everything. Not clearly, not in a way that made sense. I remembered waking up, but not leaving the facility. I remembered coming home, but not the drive, not the key in the lock, not the walk up the stairs. And when I thought harder, I couldn't even remember my last real dream before the study, because maybe there hadn't been one. I opened my eyes again. The mirror was closer now, the reflection smiling wider, like it knew I was breaking down, like it knew I was losing. It's okay, you'll forget soon, just like last time. I gasped, because I had heard those words before. Not in the mirror, not in this moment, but before I had woken up, before I had left, before I had even started resisting. And suddenly, I saw it all. The first session, Dr. Lively, smiling, telling me it was just a sleep study, just a few tests, nothing to be afraid of. Then the dreams, the shifting world, the feeling of losing myself, and the first time I had looked in the mirror and saw someone else. I had fought, had panicked, had run, and then, the same moment, the same realization, the same words from the reflection. It's okay, you'll forget soon. And then, everything had reset. I staggered back, because this wasn't the first time. This wasn't the first escape. I had done this before. I had woken up before. I had run before. And every time, I had ended up right back here. Back home. But not really home. Back in the dream. Back in the loop. I turned away from the mirror. Ran out of the bathroom. My apartment felt too still. Too lifeless. I grabbed my phone. Fumbled to call someone. Anyone. But the screen was wrong. The numbers blurred. The contacts flickered. Like they were just part of the dream too. Like they had never been real at all. I turned back. The mirror stood in the hallway now. Not in the bathroom. Just waiting. Like it had always been there. Like it had been following me. I didn't know if it was in the dream, or if it was the only thing that was real. And then the reflection stepped forward. It's time to sleep. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Like gravity. Like breathing. Like something I couldn't fight anymore. I felt it wash over me. The exhaustion. The pull. Like I had been awake for years. Like I had been running forever. Easy now. I was too tired to resist. The mirror ripples. I stumble forward. My body grows heavy. And as I fall through the glass, as the world fades away, as I sink into the dream again, I hear one last whisper. Soft. Final. I don't know if it comes from me, or the reflection. But it doesn't matter anymore. You never left. And then everything goes dark.